Graydon House and Harper Audio present The Forgotten Sister by Nicola Cornick. Performed by Kristen Atherton.
O call back yesterday, bid time return. Shakespeare, Richard II. Prologue. Amy Robsart, Cumnor Village. They came for me one night in the winter of 1752, when the ice was on the pond and the trees bowed under the weight of the hoar frost. There were 9 priests out of Oxford, garbed all in white, with tapers in hand. Some looked fearful, others burned with a righteous fervour, because they thought they were doing the Lord's work. All of them looked cold, huddled within their cassocks, the one out ahead gripping the golden crucifix, as though it were all that stood between him and the devil himself. The villagers came out to watch for a while, standing around in uneasy groups, their breath like smoke on the night air. Then the lure of the warm alehouse called them back, and they went eagerly, talking of uneasy ghosts and the folly of the holy men in thinking they could trap my spirit. The hunt was long. I ran through the lost passageways of Cumnor Hall, with the priests snapping at my heels, and in the end, exhausted and vanquished, my ghost sank into the dark pool. They said their prayers over me, and returned to their cloisters, and believed the haunting to be at an end. Yet, an unquiet ghost is not so easily laid to rest. They had trapped my wandering spirit, but I was not at peace. When the truth is concealed, the pattern will repeat. The first victim was Amyas Latimer, the poor boy who fell to his death from the tower of the church where my body was buried. Then there was the little serving girl, Amethyst Green, who tumbled from the roof of Oakhanger Hall. Soon, there will be another. If no one prevents it, I know there will be a 4th death, and a 5th, and on into an endless future. The same pattern, yet different each time. A shifting, magic lantern, projecting the horror of that day centuries ago. There is only one hope. I sense her presence beside me through the dark. Each time it happens, she is there too, in a different guise, like me. She is my nemesis, the arch enemy. Yet she is the only one who can free me and break this curse. In the end, it all depends on her, and in freeing my spirit, I sense she will also free her own. Elizabeth. I met her only a handful of times in my life. She was little, but she was fierce. Always fierce enough to survive against the odds. A fighter. Clever. Ruthless. Destined always to be alone. We could never have been friends, yet we are locked together in this endless dance through time. I possessed the one thing she wanted and could not have, and in my dying, I denied it to her forever. For a little while I thought that would be enough to satisfy me. Yet revenge sours and diminishes through the years. All I wish now is to be released from my pain and to ensure this can never happen again. Elizabeth, my enemy. You are the only one who can help me now. But to do that, you must change. You must see that the truth needs to be told. Open your eyes. Find the light. Chapter 1. Lizzie, Amelia and Dudley's Wedding, 2010. Everyone was drunk. They had broken into the wedding favour boxes early and were downing champagne directly from the quarter bottles, lobbing chocolates at each other, and throwing the beribboned scented tea bags into the swimming pool. Amelia, the bride, who had personally chosen the rose pouchon and green jasmine tea bags to match the scented candles, had stormed off in tears. Dudley, instead of going after his new wife, had jumped, fully clothed, into the pool, laughing maniacally. Lizzie thought boy bands were the pits, especially Dudley's band, Callback Summer, whom she secretly believed were just talentless, entitled rich boys. She would never say that to Dudley, of course. He was her friend. But she wrote and played her own music, and before they'd split up, her band had been way more successful than Dudley's. Lizzie didn't drink. She hated it when Dudley behaved like her father, ringing her up when he was pissed, slurring his words as he told her she was his best friend in the world, that he'd love her forever. It was only because they'd known each other since the age of 6 that she put up with it. She had no idea why he had married Amelia anyway, unless it was for publicity. He'd said he was in love, but Dudley was always falling in love with someone. It was a stupid idea to get married when you were only 18. Lizzie didn't intend to marry anyone, ever. She stood up, unpleasantly aware of the sweat sliding down her back and turning her lace mini-dress transparent as it stuck to her skin. Kat, her godmother, had told her it was bad taste to wear a white dress to a wedding, but Lizzie hadn't cared. The June sun was dropping towards the horizon now, and the marquee cast long shadows across the lawn. Not a breath of wind stirred the sultry air. A band was playing on the terrace, but no one was paying any attention. Lizzie knew the partying would carry on long into the night. Dudley seemed to have an inexhaustible capacity for drink and drugs, but she was bored. Stepping out from beneath the jaunty poolside umbrella, she was hit by the full heat of the day. She hated being too hot. It didn't agree with her redhead's pale, freckled skin. Suddenly, the water looked very tempting. Dudley, seeing her hesitate on the edge of the pool, waved a soaking arm in her direction. "Lizzie," he shouted. "Come on in." Beside him, a number of girls splashed around, screaming. One was Amelia's younger sister, Anna, who had jumped in wearing her bridesmaid's dress. Another was Letty Knowles, the girlfriend of one of Dudley's bandmates, whom Lizzie privately thought was an even bigger groupie than Amelia. Lizzie smiled and shook her head. Her curls would go even frizzier if she got them wet, and there were bound to be paparazzi hiding in the trees to capture the wedding reception for the papers. Dudley would have made sure of that. She didn't want to be all over the red tops with mad hair and a wet see-through dress. She was too careful of her reputation for that. She wandered off in the direction of the luxury portaloos. Evidently, the plumbing at Oakhanger Hall, the ridiculously ostentatious wedding present that Amelia's father had bought for the bride, was not up to coping with 200 celebrity guests. Nevertheless, the cool darkness of the entrance hall beckoned to her. It took her eyes several seconds to adjust when she took off her sunglasses, and then she almost fell over the enormous pile of wedding presents spilling across the floor. Beyond the gift mountain, the flagstones stretched, smooth and highly polished, to the base of a grand staircase that curved up in 2 flights to a balustraded gallery. The soaring walls were panelled in dark wood and hung with tapestries. The whole effect was consciously mock-medieval and rather over the top, but Lizzie could see it suited Amelia's pre-Raphaelite style. A huge black grand piano skulked in a corner beside the stair, its surface playing host to a vast display of lilies, more suited to a funeral than a wedding, in Lizzie's opinion. She muffled a sneeze as the pollen tickled her nose. In contrast to the roar of the party outside, the house was sepulchrally quiet. Except, across the wide acreage of floor came the cascading melody of a harp, the notes resonating for a couple of seconds, then dying away. Lizzie spun around. There was no sign of a harp, no sign of any instrument other than the piano. The cadence came again, higher, wistful, a fall of notes that sounded like a sigh. She moved towards the sound, and then she saw it. On a little shelf to the right of the door, a crystal ball held in the cupped palms of a stone angel. The crystal swirled with a milky white mist. "Touch me." Lizzie stopped when her hand was about an inch from the crystal surface. No. The urge was strong, but she knew what would happen if she did. Ever since she had been a small child, she had had an uncanny knack of being able to read objects. It was something she had grown up with, so at first it had seemed natural. It was only when she had first mentioned it to Kat, who had looked at her as though she was a changeling, that she realised not everyone had the gift. "It's just your imagination running away with you," Kat had said, folding her in her embrace and stroking her hair, trying to soothe and normalise her, to reassure herself as much as Lizzie. "You see things because you want to see them, sweetie. It doesn't mean anything." Lizzie had never mentioned it to her again after that, but she had known Kat was wrong. Later, when she looked it up, she saw it was called psychometry. She used it carefully, secretly, to connect with her past and the mother she had lost as a child. The rest of the time, she tried not to touch anything much at all if it was likely to give her a vision. She really didn't want to know. The crystal was calling to her. She rubbed her palms down her dress to stop herself reaching out to obey the unspoken whisper. "What did you see?" Lizzie jumped. A boy was standing on the bottom step of the vast staircase, dwarfed by its height and breadth. He was staring at her. It was disconcerting. She hadn't known anyone was there. "Nothing," she said. "I didn't touch it." She sounded defensive, which was ridiculous. She'd done nothing wrong, and he was only a child. Deliberately, she relaxed her face into the smile she used for the public. "Hi, I'm Lizzie." The boy looked at her as though he was trying to make some sort of private decision about her. It was an odd expression for such a young child. Wary, thoughtful, with a flash of calculation. It hinted, Lizzie thought, at a rather terrifying intelligence. "I'm Johnny." He came forward and stuck out a hand very formally. Lizzie shook it. "You're Amelia's brother. I saw you at the wedding." She recognised him now from the church, traipsing in behind the flower girls in Amelia's wake, looking as though he'd rather be somewhere else. Amelia's family had turned out in force for the wedding. They were all very close, a situation which Lizzie secretly envied. "They made me be a page boy." Johnny sounded disgusted. He looked down at his miniature three-piece suit with loathing. Lizzie could hardly blame him. It was horribly twee. "I hated it," he said. "I'm 6 years old, not a baby." Lizzie smothered another smile. "Life lesson, Johnny. People are always trying to make you do stuff you don't want to do. You have to stand up for your rights." "Arthur says sometimes you have to do what other people want to make them happy," Johnny said. "That's true," Lizzie acknowledged. She wasn't great at putting other people's happiness first. She'd had to struggle too hard for her own. She thought Arthur, whoever he was, sounded a proper goody-goody. "It's complicated," she said. "Next time, though, ask Arthur whether he'd like to be a page boy instead of you." Johnny giggled.
"Arthur's too big to do that."
He cocked his head to one side.
"Did you really see nothing in the crystal?"
"Not a thing," Lizzie said lightly. She remembered now that Amelia liked all the flaky stuff, though with the amount of drugs she and Dudley took, sometimes they didn't need a crystal ball to see things. Lizzie didn't do drugs. She'd grown up seeing her father offer ecstasy to his dinner guests, along with coffee and mints. No, thank you.
"The crystal called to you,"
Johnny said.
"I heard it."
Okay, so he was an odd child, Lizzie thought. But then, so had she been. She felt a tug of affinity with him. "I thought I heard a harp playing," she said. "But it must have been the wind. That must have been the sound you heard too."
"There's no wind today,"
Johnny said. "Then it must have been the band," Lizzie said. She saw Johnny watching her with those bright blue eyes and thought, he knows. He knows I'm lying. How can he? He's only 6.
"Amelia says that the crystal speaks to her,"
Johnny said seriously.
"Maybe that's what you heard. She says it has healing powers."
"That's nice," Lizzie said, wondering how many more of Amelia's New Age philosophies her little brother had absorbed. Not that she could criticize. She might not like possessing woo-woo powers, but she could hardly deny they existed. "Johnny!" This time they both jumped. A man was crossing the hall towards them, young, tall, unmistakably related to Johnny, with the same lean features and dark blue eyes. Where Johnny had ruffled blonde hair, this man's hair, however, was black, and unlike Johnny, he looked good in a morning suit. Lizzie thought he also looked familiar, and wondered if they had met before. There had been such a crowd in the church, and she knew so many people, but she couldn't quite place him. Perhaps she'd seen him on a billboard. He looked like a model. His gaze focused on her, and Lizzie saw that he recognized her, and, a second later, saw equally clearly that he did not like her. It was a novel experience for her to be disliked. She worked hard to be sweet and appealing. There was no reason to dislike her.
"Hi, Arthur,"
Johnny said.
"This is Lizzie."
"I know," Arthur said. Arthur Robsart, Lizzie thought. Of course. He was not a model, but he did do something on TV. Not that she ever had time to watch. And he had some impossibly glamorous fiancée who wasn't at the wedding because she was about to make it in Hollywood. He was also Amelia's older brother. Or half-brother, she thought. Amelia's family was almost as complicated as hers, which, she supposed, explained his dislike for her. Her heart dropped a little. She'd tried to be nice to Amelia. After all, she was Dudley's oldest friend, so she should be Amelia's friend too. But somehow it hadn't worked, and evidently Arthur knew that, and like some other mean people, thought she should get out of Dudley's life. Johnny scrambled up from the step and held out his arms unself-consciously to his brother, asking to be picked up. Arthur's face lightened into a transforming smile. "Where have you been?" he asked, ruffling Johnny's hair. "Your mum's looking for you."
"I want to get out of this stupid outfit,"
Johnny grumbled, fretful as any ordinary 6-year-old now. "Come on then." Arthur swung him up onto his shoulders. "Let's go and get changed." He gave Lizzie a cool nod, nothing more. Her heart dropped a little further, which was weird since his dislike mattered not at all. She was 17 years old, and she'd already learned not to care about other people's opinions. She'd also learned not to get entangled with handsome men. Or any men, for that matter. The life lessons she'd already absorbed would probably make even a psychiatrist wince. As Arthur's footsteps died away, silence washed back into the hall, and with it, the plaintive echo of the crystal's song. Unwilling, but unable to resist, Lizzie moved back towards it. The glass had turned a pale violet colour now. It seemed too beautiful not to touch. And surely, something so beautiful couldn't be dangerous. Her fingertips brushed the surface of the ball. It felt cool and smooth, the drifts of mist within, following the movement of her hand. Immediately, Lizzie saw a vision of the crystal sitting in the window of a shop in Glastonbury, surrounded by a whole variety of other bogus magical items, from joss sticks to druids' robes. She could see Amelia, exclaiming in delight, pointing it out to Dudley, who had his habitual expression of bored amusement plastered across his face. Dudley shrugged. "It's total rubbish, but buy it if you want." Lizzie withdrew her hand. Psychometry gave her the ability to pry into other people's lives sometimes, but she really didn't want to know what went on between Dudley and Amelia. She absent-mindedly rubbed her fingers over the lines of the stone angel's wings, tracing the intricate carving. It was a beautiful piece, the hands cupping the crystal ball, the head bent. As she touched it, she heard the thrum of the harp again, but this time it wasn't sweet and plaintive. There was a cold edge to it, like shards of ice, that sent a shiver down her spine. The world exploded suddenly around her. She felt a rush of movement and a blur of colour. She felt a hand in the small of her back, pushing hard. Then she was falling. There was a rush of air against her face and the lightness of empty space beneath her. There was fear screaming inside her head. Then, as quickly as they had arrived, the sensations passed. She was lying on the floor, and people were buzzing around her like flies. "What happened?" I heard her screaming. "Trust Lizzie Kingdom to try and steal the limelight today of all days." Lizzie sat up. Her head was woozy, as though she had had too much champagne. Pieces of the crystal lay scattered about her in glittering shards, one of which had embedded itself in the palm of her right hand. It stung fiercely. She could hear Amelia in the background, wailing that Lizzie had broken her gazing ball. The stone angel lay next to her, unbroken. Lizzie felt dazed, her mind cloudy, sickness churning in her stomach. What the hell had happened? She knew she hadn't smashed the crystal. People were still talking. No one seemed bothered about helping her up. She could hear Dudley's voice. "For fuck's sake, what's the matter? It was only some cheap ornament." Amelia's wails rose above the chatter. Lizzie focused on keeping still and not throwing up. That would be the final humiliation. She felt like a pariah, abandoned in a sea of glass. The crowd fell back a little, crunching the slivers of glass beneath their stilettos and hipster brogues. Arthur pushed through to her. He didn't say anything, simply held out a hand to help her to her feet. Lizzie grabbed it and scrambled up. She had no pride left. She followed him down what felt like an endless succession of dark corridors, into what looked like an old scullery, full of discarded wedding paraphernalia, piles of empty boxes and flower containers heaped up and left out of sight. This, Lizzie thought, was definitely the servants' quarters. She had been demoted from guest to unsightly wedding detritus, along with all the rest of the rubbish. Arthur was rummaging in a cupboard underneath a white ceramic sink. He emerged with a first aid kit in his hand. She turned her palm up so that he could clean the cut. The bleeding had stopped now, but the wound throbbed, even more so when Arthur dabbed at it with antiseptic. Lizzie suppressed a wince as it stung. He was so dour and exasperated, and there was no way she was going to show any weakness. "I'm sorry," she said, as the silence became blistering. "I really don't know what happened." "Keep your hand still whilst I bandage it up," Arthur said. "It's Amelia you should be apologising to," he added. "It's her wedding you've ruined." "Don't be ridiculous," Lizzie snapped. Her hand was smarting, but not as much as her feelings. "If anyone has ruined the wedding, it's Dudley, and that's not my fault." "You think?" Arthur looked at her very directly, and her heart did an odd sort of flip. He continued to wrap the bandage methodically around her hand and her wrist, as gently as before. Lizzie suddenly became acutely aware of his touch against her skin. And by the time he had finished and tucked the end in, she was squirming to escape. "Thanks," she said, jumping up and heading for the door. "I'll just grab my bag and—" Go. There was no way she was hanging around here any longer. She felt very odd. Back in the grand hall, someone had swept up the glass, and the place was empty. It was as though nothing had ever happened. Lizzie could hear the band playing, and splashes and screams from the pool. The party had moved up a gear. She called her driver, who was there in 3 minutes. She was in such a hurry to get away that she left her very expensive jacket behind. Days later, when she finally emptied the wedding favours, tea bags and scented candle from her goodie bag, she found that in the confusion, someone must have accidentally slipped the little stone angel in with all the other stuff. She meant to return it to Amelia, but after all the fuss, it never seemed like the right time. Then she saw Amelia wearing her jacket, as though it were her own. So she never mentioned it again, but stowed the angel away in a cupboard. She knew it was petty, but Amelia had started it, and the jacket was probably worth more than the ornament anyway. Over the years, she forgot about the stone angel, but she never forgot Dudley and Amelia's wedding. She tried, but there was no way she could ever forget a day that had ended with Amelia in hysterics and with blood on her hands. It felt ill-starred. It felt as though sooner or later, something bad was going to happen. Chapter 2. Amy. Stanfield Manor, Norfolk, August 1549. I met Robert Dudley on a night of moonlight, fire, and gunpowder. The wind had a sharp edge to it that evening, summer already turning away towards the chill of autumn. It brought with it the scent of burning from the rebel camp 12 miles to the north. The sky burned too, in shades of red and orange below the dark clouds, so that it was impossible to tell what was fire and what was sunset. They said that there were more than 12,000 men assembled on Mousehold Heath, more than in the whole of Norwich itself. And Norwich was a great city, second only to London. Among the rebel prisoners was my half-brother, John Appleyard, taken by our cousin, Robert Kett, to help my father ponder whether his loyalty was to his king or to his kin. John's capture cast a dark shadow over our house, but our mother made no plea. It was not in her nature to beg, not even for her children. And father stood firm. He was, and always would be, the king's man. "We will be 15 for dinner," Mother said when I met her in the hall. The servants were sweeping like madmen, some scattering fresh rushes, others covering the table with the best diamond-patterned linen cloths, the ones that Mother generally considered too fine for us. I saw the sparkle of silver, bowls, flagons, knives.
There is an army of rebels 12 miles away, I said, staring at the display. Is it wise to bring out your treasure? She gave me the look that said I was pert. I waited for the reproach that would accompany it, the claim that my father had spoiled me, the youngest, his only daughter, and that I would never get myself a husband if I was so forward. Pots and kettles. I got 3/4 of my nature from my mother, and well she knew it. From her I had inherited a quick mind and a quick tongue, but also the knowledge of when I needed to guard it. Men say that women chatter, but they are the ones who so often lack discretion. Women can be as close as the grave. But Mother did not reproach me. Instead, her gaze swept over me from head to foot. There was a small frown between her brows. I thought it was because my hair was untidy, and put up a hand to smooth it. My appearance was my vanity. I was fair and had no need of the dye. My skin was pale rose and cream, and my eyes were wide and blue. I knew I was a beauty. I won't pretend. You are quite right, Mother said, after a moment's scrutiny, with a wry twist of her lips. You, of all our treasures, should be kept safe at a time like this. Unfortunately, your father insists that you should attend dinner tonight. I gaped at her, not understanding. I had only been referring to the plate and linens. Seeing my confusion, her smile grew, but it was a smile that chilled me in some manner I did not quite understand. It hinted at adult matters, and I, for all my 17 years, was still a child. Your presence has been requested, she said. The Earl of Warwick comes at the head of the King's army. They march against the rebels. He is bringing his captains here to dine with us tonight and take counsel with your father. 2 of his sons ride with him, Ambrose and Robert. My heart gave a tiny leap of excitement, which I quickly suppressed out of guilt. The Earl of Warwick was coming here, to my corner of Norfolk, bringing danger and excitement to a place that seldom saw either. It was a curious feeling that took me then, a sense of anticipation, tinged with the sadness of something lost. Peace. Innocence, almost. But the rebels had already shattered both peace and innocence when they had risen up against the King's laws. I'm sorry, I said. About the King's army, I mean. It is hard for you with John a prisoner and family loyalty split. She looked startled for a moment, and then smiled at me, a proper smile this time, one that lit her tired eyes. You are a sweet child, Amy, she said, patting my cheek. Her smile died. Except that you are not a child any longer, it seems. She sighed. Do you remember Robert Dudley? She was watching me very closely. I was not sure what she was looking for. He asked your father if you would be present at dinner tonight. No, she corrected herself. He requested that you should be present, which is a different matter entirely. Her look made it clear what she thought of the sons of the nobility, asking after a gentleman's daughter. I suppose she imagined that no good could come of it, despite my father's ambitions. I remember him, I said. I smiled a little at the memory, for a picture had come into my mind. A small, obstinate boy, his black hair standing up on end like a cockerel's crest. A boy whom the other children had mocked because he was as dark as a Spaniard. More cruelly, they had called him a traitor's grandson, because the first Dudley of note had been a lawyer who had risen high in old King Henry's favour, and had then fallen from grace when the new King Henry had wanted to sweep his father's stables clean. It had all happened before I was born, before Robert had been born too, but the ghost of the past had haunted him. People had long memories and cruel tongues, and as a result, he was a child full of anger and fierce defiance, seeming all the more impotent because he had been so small and so young. I had secretly pitied Robert, even whilst he had sworn he would be a knight one day and kill anyone who slighted his family name. "When did you meet him?" Mother was like a terrier after a rat when she saw that smile. "I met him years ago at Kenninghall," I said. "And once, I think, when the Duchess took us up to London." My mother nodded. I felt the tension ease from her a little. Perhaps she believed that no harm could have come of a meeting between children under the auspices of the Duchess of Norfolk. "You were very young then," she said. "I wonder why he remembers you." "I was kind to him, I suppose," I said. "The other children were not." I remembered dancing with Robert at some childish party at court. Lady Anne Tilney had scorned his proffered hand for the galliard, and so he had turned to me as second choice. We must have been all of 12 years old, and he had spent the entire dance glaring at Lady Anne and stepping on my toes. "They may be regretting that unkindness," my mother said, with another of her wry smiles, "now that his father rivals the Duke of Somerset for the king's favour." A shiver tickled my spine, like the ghosts of the past stirring again. I wondered whether Robert's father had learned nothing from his own father's fate. Why men chose to climb so high when the risk was so great was a matter on which I had no understanding. It was as though they enjoyed tempting the gods with their recklessness and repeating history over and again. Mother's mind had already moved on to more practical matters, however. "Wear your blue gown," she instructed. "The one that matches your eyes. Since you and I are to be present, we shall at least make your father proud, even if we will be bored to distraction by talk of military strategy." "Yes, Mother," I said dutifully. "I'll send Joan to you," Mother said, "and don't lean out of the window to see what goes on outside whilst you dress." Seeing my blank look, she said with a hint of irritation, "Did I not mention but a moment ago that there is an army coming? There'll be nigh on 10,000 men encamped in the fields beyond the orchard. I do not want you to become their entertainment." "No, Mother," I said. I thought it would be easy enough to steal a look without being seen. The encampments, the fires, the horses, the food cooking, the scents and the noise. Stanfield Manor would be abuzz, and it was impossible not to feel the expectancy in the air. "Remember that soldiers are dangerous, Amy," Mother added sharply. "Commoner or nobleman alike." It seemed excessive to say, "Yes, Mother," again, so I nodded obediently and hurried away to the stairs, aware that her watchful gaze was pinned upon my back. There was nothing to dispute in what she had said, nor in those things that she had not put into words. I might be young, but I knew what she meant about soldiers, and the way in which they snatched at pleasure with both hands, in case it was their last chance. I did not want to be that prize, seized for a moment's gratification, then cast aside. Even so, I thought about Robert Dudley whilst Joan helped me to dress, and started to plait my long fair hair. She was slow and methodical, her tongue sticking from the corner of her mouth as her fingers worked. My thoughts, my dreams, were the opposite of slow, skipping lightly from one place to the next. My memories of Robert were vague, but that did not stop me from pinning my dreams on him. What sort of a man had he become? Was he handsome? Would he like me? Even as I counselled myself to hold fast to my common sense, I could feel excitement bubbling through me. "Keep still, Mistress Amy," Joan stuttered as the braids slid from her fingers. "You are hopping about like a hen on a thorn." It seemed to take her an age of pinning and smoothing and straightening. But finally, she was done, and I flew down the stairs. Yet when I reached the door of the hall, I hesitated, stung by a sudden shyness at the sound of voices within. I smoothed my skirts, patted my coif, took a deep breath, but my feet seemed fixed to the flagstones. I could not move. "Amy!" Mother appeared in the doorway, voice as sharp as a needle. "Why are you loitering there?" Her gaze darted past me, looking for trouble. When she found none, it did not seem to appease her. "Come in!" She flapped at me to go ahead of her. The hall was hot. We did not need a fire in August, but Father had ordered one lit anyway, all the better to show off the richness of his glass and silver. I wondered how the table bore the weight of so much food, and spared a thought for the kitchen staff. Cook's sweat must have been liberally mixed in with the sauces. The servants were sweating too as they attended us, heat and nervousness making their faces redden and their hands shake. Father, never the most patient master, was snapping orders as though he were a general in the field. "There is a space for you there, Amy." Mother pushed me towards the centre of the table, where there was an empty place laid. I sat. She sat opposite me, watching me like a cat with a mouse. I felt like telling her that there was no need for her vigilance. On the one side of me was an old man who looked as though he had last ridden to war alongside the late King Henry at the Battle of Spurs. On the other was a younger man who was so fat I wondered at the horse that had to bear his weight, and whether he had to be winched into the saddle. A swift search of the room, conducted surreptitiously as I took my seat, had told me that neither Robert Dudley nor his brother Ambrose was present. I felt disproportionately disappointed. The old soldier ignored me, sucking noisily on chicken bones and throwing the scraps to the dogs. The younger smiled shyly and poured wine for me. At the head of the table, Father was deep in discussion with Lord Warwick. The King's General was a fine-looking man, all the more so in his armour. He had presence and grace. I watched him as he talked. Animated, and at times fierce. I caught an echo of Robert in the proud lift of his head and directness of his gaze. I picked at my food. The chicken was drenched in a sauce that was too rich and heavy. I wondered if Cook was a rebel sympathiser and wanted to give the King's men a stomachache. Not that they were complaining. They looked half-starved, and only the presence of ladies prevented them from falling on each dish like dogs as it came out. There was little conversation. The weather, the poor quality of the roads, the availability of horses, and the fine taste of Stanfield-grown apples sustained us through several courses, whilst I sat and sweated and reflected bitterly that I had wasted my hopes and dreams on a fantasy. I escaped to my chamber as soon as I was able. Mother had no need to chivvy me out whilst the men sat late over their wine and their strategy. I took off my pretty dress and released my hair and lay down, but of course I could not sleep. I was too irritated. With Robert, who had asked for me and then forgotten me. With myself for building something out of nothing. Outside, there was a cacophony of noise. Shouting, hammering, horses, footsteps, sounds of urgency that now, rather than exciting me, only served to annoy me. After a while, I realized that I was not going to sleep. That irritated me even more. I threw back the covers and strode to the window, pushing wide the leaded pane. Outside, there was full moonlight, bright as day, and yet casting the world in only black and white. It was the moon that preceded the harvest, except that the rebellion had thrown the harvest into disarray this year. The crops lay trampled in the fields, and there would be no festival of celebration, though there could well be a reaping of souls, if not of corn. Instead of mummers and music, shadow men walked amongst the trees of the orchard. Smoke rose white against the bleached night sky, and the air was rich with the smell of cooking and dung, a curious combination that caught at my throat. There was sudden movement below my window. A man swung down from his horse, tethered it to a tree. I saw him in flashes of silver and black, the moonlight on his armor, his long shadow. He took off his helmet and took a deep breath of air, head back, shaking himself like a dog coming out of water. He was dark. The moon lit shades of blue in his hair like a raven's wing. Then he looked up, and the light fell full on his face. I must have made some involuntary movement that caught his eye, for he turned his head sharply to look at me. The gesture was so familiar, even though I had not seen him for so many years. Recognition tugged deep within me. He raised a hand in greeting. I saw the flash of his smile. He knew me too. I pushed the window frame wider. "Robert Dudley," I said. "You missed dinner." He laughed. "I'm here now." He set his foot to the climbing rose that grew beneath my window. The whole delicate structure shivered as he put his weight on it, the last petals of summer drifting down, and I leaned out further to stop him. "You'll fall!" I had no care for propriety, only for his safety. I did not see the ranks of grinning soldiers pausing in their drinking and their gaming to watch us. I saw only him. Already, I was swept away. "Never," he said. "You won't lose me, Amy Robsart. I'll not fall." A cloud passed over the moon, red like blood from the fire on the heath. Despite the cumbersome weight of the armor, he climbed fast, sure-footed like a cat. He reached the window ledge and swung himself over, and then he was in my room. A ragged cheer went up from the men below, and he reached across me to close the window and banish them, so that there was only the two of us there in the candlelight. He smelled of sweat and horses and smoke and the night air. It was exciting, and my head swam. We stood and stared at one another. His armor was dented and blackened by smoke. His face, likewise, was filthy with dirt and sweat. I put a hand up to touch his chest, but could feel nothing but the coldness of hard steel beneath my palm. So I raised it to his cheek and touched warm flesh. He was vital and vivid, and all the things that my life lacked. His eyes blazed as he bent his head to kiss me. That was how I met Robert Dudley again. By the morning, we had pledged our troth, and the seeds of our mutual destruction were already sown. Chapter 3. Lizzie, present day. The call came through 5 minutes before Lizzie was due on stage. She was nervous, which meant that she was also in a bad mood. She didn't do literary events. They really weren't her thing. Everyone knew that she hadn't written the book herself. She'd been quite open about that from the start, and she couldn't even remember much of what the story was about. What the hell was she going to talk about? What the hell were they going to ask her? She'd insisted on approval of all the interview questions, and now she couldn't remember a single one of them, or the answers she'd prepared. She stood up and paced across the tiny space that the festival organisers had imaginatively called the Green Room. It was green, because it was a corner of a marquee that had been cordoned off for her use. The carpet was actual grass. Lizzie could even see a ladybird crawling towards her. There was one lopsided mirror, an extension lead was the only source of power, and there was no proper lighting. which made doing her hair and makeup a nightmare. It was so hot under the canvas that once her makeup was done, it had all slid off her face anyway. The fruit juice was warm, and the sandwiches had curled. Kat had reminded her that she couldn't expect the same VIP treatment at a literary event that she got at a film studio, which had only made her more annoyed. It wasn't as though she was a diva. Everyone said she was lovely. But the whole thing was hideous, and she was within an inch of walking out. The other authors speaking at the symposium on young adult fiction, the real ones, were accommodated in the historic environs of Gloucester College, but perhaps they hadn't thought that appropriate for her, the celebrity, the interloper. Here she was right next door to the main marquee, where she would be doing her interview. She could hear the crowd arriving, hear the swell of sound and voices, and sense the pulse of excitement. Normally, that would have excited her too, with the buzz of a performance imminent. But that was when she was singing, or presenting, or performing on Stars of the Dance. She had spent most of her life in the spotlight. Tonight, though, was all about writing, and she was so far beyond her comfort zone she couldn't even see it over the horizon. She'd turned down the invitation to the event as soon as it had arrived, but Bill had overruled her for once. He'd called her into his office in Bloomsbury, which was also unusual, as he normally came to her. As her agent, he did work for her after all. It wasn't her job to go to him. And she was 26 now, not 16, as she had been when she had signed with him. She did not take well to being told off like a sulky child. Thinking back, Lizzie remembered how distracted and irritable Bill had been that morning, even more than normal. She had hoped it was just his ulcer playing up, but suspected that it was because of her. She knew Bill wanted her to change direction and move away from the kids presenting into something more grown-up. He'd suggested a game show that was currently looking for a new host, and she'd turned it down on the grounds that it would kill her brain cells faster than sniffing paint. Then he put forward a new show called Celebrity Wrestling, The Hot Moves. She'd told him it sounded like porn. Bill had slammed the flat of his hand down on his desk in exasperation. "For fuck's sake!" he had shouted. Lizzie hadn't jumped at the crack of Bill's hand on the wood. Her father had been given to sudden violent storms of temper, and she was inured to it. "Do you need a cup of tea, Bill?" she asked. "It might help you calm down." "I need a client I can work with," Bill snapped. "It's time to grow up, Lizzie. You're too wholesome. It's infantilizing. What are you now? 27? "I was 26 last month," Lizzie said coldly. Bill's secretary had sent flowers from him, a whole hothouse full of them. She'd known Bill had had nothing to do with it.
"Then act like it,"
Bill said sharply.
"No more of this bubblegum pop and kids shows, and get yourself a partner. I don't care what sex they are. This best friends forever thing you have going on with Dudley Lester may have been cute when you were 15, but it's cloying now."
Lizzie had known it wouldn't be long before her relationship with Dudley would be thrown at her. Dudley was her oldest friend, her rock, and she loved him as much as Bill hated him for the influence he had over her. "You're well aware that I haven't written or performed any music for over a year," she said, ignoring Bill's comments about Dudley to focus on her other grudge against him. "You told me to stop, and I did, even though I loved it. I've been offered nothing but crappy kids' gigs ever since."
"Because you're such a princess," Bill said. "People still think of you as a teenager. Your reputation
is squeaky clean," Lizzie said, "and it stays that way. I'm not going to shag someone of any sex just to please you." There was a long, dangerous silence. Lizzie could feel the tears stinging the backs of her eyes and blinked them away. She'd worked so damned hard for everything she had, distanced herself from the sleaze and scandal of her childhood, and she wasn't going to let Bill put any of that in jeopardy. She saw his shoulders slump.
You're not just going to walk into Newsnight from the Ninja Tea Time Club, he said. You've got to put the graft in first.
He tapped the papers in front of him.
Starting with the Oxford Symposium. I know you've refused the invite, but if you want people to buy your books, then you need to get out there and meet the readers.
They're kids' books, Lizzie said. I thought you said I should aim for a more mature audience.
Writing adds gravitas, Bill said. Lots of celebs write books for children.
But it's Oxford, Lizzie objected. They'll hate me. Everyone despises celebrity authors, especially the ones who don't even write their own books. We're the lowest of the low, taking huge advances we don't need and cheating ordinary writers out of a living.
You've been reading the Bookseller magazine again, Bill said irritably. I told you not to do that.
You gave it to me so I could see how well my latest book was doing, Lizzie said. #1 in the e-book charts for 3 weeks so far and in the top 10 paperbacks.
Exactly.
Bill cut her off with a snap of his fingers.
So, get over to Oxford and keep it at #1.
What do you think, Kat? Lizzie said. She'd brought Kat Ashley with her, even though Bill hadn't invited her, even though he barely tolerated her as a fixture in Lizzie's life. Nominally, Kat was Lizzie's PA, but she wasn't exactly efficient. Lizzie really needed a secretary to organise Kat, but she was fiercely loyal to her, because their relationship had nothing to do with work. Not really. Kat was her godmother, and had looked after Lizzie when her mother had died. She'd been in her life ever since, the only constant other than Dudley, and someone Lizzie clung to tenaciously, because deep down, she saw Kat as the last real connection to her mother.
Don't ask Kat, Bill exploded. She'll only tell you what you want to hear.
Kat glared at him. She's my friend, Lizzie said. Of course she's on my side.
I'm on your side, Bill said bitterly. If only you could see it.
You should do it, honey, Kat said, surprising them both. Bill's right. You want the books to do well. Your fans love them.
She shrugged.
It's business, babes.
So here Lizzie was, in Oxford, on a wet September evening, about to be interviewed by some local journalist, who probably couldn't believe his luck in getting to meet Lizzie Kingdom, one-time girl band member turned kids' TV presenter, and now non-author of the Celia Jones and Friends books for preteen girls. Her phone buzzed. She waved a hand at Kat, who was sitting on a hard wooden chair painting her nails turquoise, engrossed. Her tongue stuck out the side of her mouth with the effort of concentration. Get that for me, would you, Kat? Kat looked pained, but she stretched out her unvarnished hand for the phone without reproach. Lizzie felt a flash of guilt. She was behaving like a brat, and had been doing so all day. It was the nerves. Nothing should make her nervous after all these years. She had been a child star at 5 and an adult one at 12. Her father, a theatre impresario, had seen her potential as a performer when she was in nappies and had promptly signed her up to do baby commercials. After her mother had died, he had forever been taking her out of school for parts in various shows. It had all progressed from there. Tonight, though, was about literature, a subject on which she knew next to nothing. She didn't feel comfortable, and she hated that sense of vulnerability. It's Dudley, Kat said, checking the caller ID. Her voice was expressionless in the way that could only imply disapproval. Kat was another one who heartily disliked Dudley Lester. Kat said that Dudley used Lizzie, that he lived off her success, because he had never quite achieved the same level of fame himself, and now that he had financial troubles, he was even more of a leech. Lizzie knew there was a grain of truth in this. When Dudley's band had split 4 years before, he had wanted to move into presenting, and Lizzie had helped, putting some work his way, suggesting joint projects. She didn't see the problem, That was what friends did for one another, and Dudley had always been there for her. She could tell him anything and everything, and frequently did. He was the only person she loved and trusted completely. She knew Dudley could be petulant sometimes, but he made her laugh. She didn't have many proper friends, people who understood what it was like to have a spectacularly messed up childhood, lived out under very bright public lights. Dudley genuinely appreciated that, and had stood by her through it all. That counted for a lot. Smiling, she took the phone from Kat's outstretched hand. It would be so good to talk to Dudley. He'd cajole her out of her nervousness. He could always make her feel better. "Hi, Duds," she said. "Have you rung to wish me luck?"
Lizzie?
Dudley didn't wait for her to finish.
Thank God you're there. She's dead, Lizzie. I've only just heard. I don't know what to do.
He sounded dazed, his voice so broken and confused that Lizzie barely recognised it. She felt a lurch of fear. This did not sound like the Dudley she knew, the irreverent, impetuous, fun-loving companion who could tease her out of any bad mood.
Dudley,
she said sharply.
What's happened? What do you mean? Who's dead? Shit,
Dudley said.
Haven't you seen it online? Are you locked in a cellar somewhere, for God's sake? I told you, it's Amelia. She's dead.
Amelia. Lizzie's mind locked onto the name. Amelia was Dudley's soon-to-be ex-wife, whose existence Lizzie so frequently and so conveniently forgot. The churning sickness in her stomach intensified. How could Amelia be dead? She was only 28 years old. Had there been an accident? A car crash? Like the one that had taken Lizzie's mother? For a terrifying second, the present slipped away, and Lizzie felt as though she was 4 years old again, watching through the banisters as the police came to break the news to her father. Sunlight, dust motes dancing in the air, the smell of whiskey pervading the house, the radio chattering in the kitchen, the old battered panda clutched in her hand. Her father, shielding his eyes so no one could read his expression, the ring of a lie in his voice as he expressed his grief.
Lizzie!
Dudley's urgent voice broke through the memory. Lizzie tried to pull her thoughts together, to focus.
What happened?
She repeated.
How did she die? Were you there?
Dudley's voice was frayed, high-pitched.
No, it was nothing to do with me. I don't know anything about it.
He stopped again. Lizzie waited, aware of the fear building inside her, of a sense of impending doom, of dark shadows gathering. For a moment, all she could hear was the rising sound of the crowd in the marquee. All she could feel was the heat trapped beneath the canvas, pressing down on her, making her lightheaded. She steadied herself with one hand on the back of Kat's chair and realised that she was shaking.
Amelia's dead, Lizzie,
Dudley repeated, and he sounded so lost that Lizzie felt the huge, horrible weight of sickness settle hard in her stomach.
She fell down the stairs at Oakhanger Hall and broke her neck.
Chapter 4. Amy, Stansfield Manor, Norfolk, April 1550. Throughout my childhood, whenever I had needed wise counsel, I had sought out my half-brother, Arthur. He had always been the one to cajole me out of ill temper, or soothe my tears when my mother and I disagreed. She and I were close. She taught me everything from how to run a large household to how to make herbal ointments, but she was brisk and too busy for my tantrums. My sister Anna and I scrapped like cats. John was a studious boy who grew into a distant young man. There was only Arthur who had the patience for me. That day, I found him in the stables. This was no surprise. He was seldom anywhere but on the farm. Our father had tried to educate him as a gentleman, for he was his elder son, illegitimate or not. But whilst Arthur had done well enough at Oxford, he had shown no desire to enter either the law or the church. It seemed he had no ambition. Father did not understand that, though when Arthur expressed a wish to run father's estates, he did not demur, and respected Arthur for his skills, particularly with the animals. I sat on a bale of straw, inhaling the scent of warm horses, hay, and hot oil from the lantern, listening to the chink of the rope in the metal ring as the mare shifted beneath the currycomb. Arthur talked to her as he worked. Soft words, affectionate, soothing, moving the comb in efficient circles over her coat. She seemed to like it, nudging him when he stopped for a moment. I knew better than to interrupt him, and it was only when he laid the comb aside and picked up the dandy brush that he paused, shaking the hair out of his eyes, and looked at me. "You will spoil your gown sitting there," he said. "The straw is still damp." I shrugged. "It doesn't matter." He raised his brows. "I thought there was something wrong. Now I know there must be. When were you so careless of your attire?" "I am crossed in love," I said. "I care nothing for how I look." His lips twitched into a smile at either the melodrama or the blatant lie, or perhaps both. He and I both knew it would take more than a little heartache to reduce my vanity to ashes. Arthur was 5 years my senior, the result of a liaison between our father and a woman who had lived in a cottage on another of father's estates at Siddiston. She had been widowed when she bore Arthur, and died soon after of the flux. Arthur was taken into my father's household, and there he remained. He had an uneasy relationship with my mother. They were always courteous to one another, but I knew that his existence gave her pain, which was odd, I thought, since she had come to her marriage with 2 children of her own from her last husband. Perhaps it was the gossip that caused her grief, since it was still said in Siddiston, Stansfield, and around, that Arthur's mother had been an exceptionally beautiful woman, and that our father was utterly besotted with her. Certainly, Arthur had been blessed with good looks, just as I had. We quite put John and Anna in the shade. "Let me guess," Arthur said. He started to groom the mare again, long, firm strokes that brought up the shine of her coat to a rich chestnut gleam. "Our father is set on you marrying your fancy lord, whilst your mother counsels against it. You must inevitably upset one or the other of them." I stared at him. "How did you know?" Arthur glanced up at me over his shoulder. "You need to ask. When the house has resounded to your parents' high words this week past? Everyone knows they are at odds. Our father set on this ambitious plan, and your mother arguing that his aims are too high." "What shall I do?" I said plaintively. Arthur straightened up, the brush still in his hand. "Why are you asking me? You will do exactly what you want to do, Amy. You want to marry Robert Dudley, so you will have him regardless of any opposition." Arthur knew me very well. I admitted, albeit to myself alone, that he was right. There was a whole host of reasons why I wished to marry Robert. Some were noble. We loved each other. Some were personal. He was handsome and charming. Others were less admirable. I wanted to make a match that would have my half-sister gasping with envy. Anna had married a gentleman the previous year and gone to live at a fine manor house, but she would never have dreamed of looking as high as I did for a husband. She would be green with envy. Robert had no money, but he had connections, status, and plans for greater things. But this, it seemed, was my mother's objection. Arthur was right. We had all heard the bitter words exchanged between our parents as day after day, night after night, they fought over my future.
"You are blinded by ambition," was Mother's refrain to my father. "You overreach yourself in this alliance with the Dudleys. Those who rise so high will surely fall and take us all down with them."
Her protests, I knew, were prompted by fear. It was the fear of a woman who had sat by on more than one occasion and seen how the grandiose plans of men could lead to ruin. Our cousins, Robert and William Kett, had been hanged at the end of the last year for their uprising against the king. It was, she said, a woman's place to sit at home and weep whilst their men threw away their lives. I had happier hopes than that. I had no intention of weeping. I would marry Robert and join him at the king's court, and my life would be a whirl of excitement. I saw no further than that. I was young and in love. Why would I? "I sometimes think that Mother is a witch," I said, standing up, shaking the straw from my skirts. "She fears the future. Do you think that is because she has seen it?" I half expected Arthur to make the sign of the cross at my words, for he was a countryman at heart, and, as such, was full of superstition. He did not smile, but nor did he flinch from the question. "I think she has seen a semblance of the future," he said slowly. "We all have. We have all seen great men stumble and lose all they have worked to achieve. She does not want that for our father, and least of all does she want it for you." "I will do very well," I said. "I will be a great lady, and live in a castle and have 10 children. The Dudleys always have lots of children." I liked that vision of my future. It would give me a place, a purpose. It pleased me very much to know that, for I was outgrowing my life at Stansfield. What was I to do if I stayed here year after year, a spinster losing my bloom? I needed an establishment of my own, and a place in the world. "I do love Robert," I repeated, as though that was the charm that would ensure my future happiness. "We love each other." Arthur did not reply, and for a moment I thought I saw shadows gathering in his eyes. I wondered if he was thinking about the other sharp words that Mother had uttered in an unguarded moment. That Robert was infatuated with my beauty and wanted my body, but that lust would never sustain a happy marriage. I had not really understood what she had meant. Robert made me feel desired, and that pleased me as surely as it would please any woman. Besides, I knew that the advantages were not all on my side. Father possessed influence in the country, which Lord Warwick intended to use to his benefit. Already there was talk of Robert serving as a member of the Parliament for Norfolk, and I knew that Father could make that happen. This was not such an unequal alliance. So I told myself, but despite that reassurance, I felt somehow chilled. To comfort myself, I reached up to kiss Arthur's cheek, resting one hand on the warm, smooth flank of the horse. It was peaceful here, with them both in the stables, but I was done with the peaceful life of the country maid. I had been fashioned for finer things. "Thank you, Arthur," I said. He gave me a hug, his arms strong and comforting about me. Even though I thought it would crease my gown, I returned the embrace. I would miss him when I went to London, but I knew I would never tempt him to visit me in the city. He would have felt as out of place there as I now felt here in the country. Arthur belonged to the land. It would always call him home. "Why do you thank me?" he said wryly. "All I have done is to tell you what you wanted to hear." "I am thanking you for being the best of brothers," I said. I know you will never fail me."
"That, at least, I can promise," Arthur said. He released me. He wasn't smiling. His eyes were grave. "If you need me, Amy," he said, "I will always be there for you."
"Of course you will," I said. I spoke carelessly, for why would I ever need him? On the contrary, I had already started to think of the favours I might gain for my family when I was a courtier's wife. I went out into the stable yard. There had been a rain shower, and the cobbles were glazed with water, but the twilight sky had cleared to a pale blue. A sliver of moon climbed above the clouds. My natural good spirits had reasserted themselves, and I felt excited and light of heart. I knew I would be able to persuade Mother to my point of view. She wanted to see me happy, and Robert would make me happy. There would be no need for Father to overrule her. She would agree the match, and Robert and I would be wed. Mother thought that she could see the future, but the one I was intent upon was quite different from her vision. Robert and I would grow together. I would impress on him my worth as more than just a beautiful wife and, God willing, a mother. His parents, like mine, had a strong mutual love and respect. The model was there for us to follow. He would quickly realize that a woman could not only be his sun and stars, the center of his world, but his equal, his inspiration, his life. There was no limit to my belief in him and in myself. And of course, I was right. Robert would indeed come to value one woman more highly than any other on earth. I had no idea that that woman would never be me. Chapter 5. Lizzie, present day. Bill had barreled into the tent about a minute after Dudley's call came through, surrounded by a phalanx of security in dark suits. He'd cut Lizzie off in mid-call and taken her phone away from her, saying that it was imperative that she didn't speak to Dudley or anyone else until they had spoken to the lawyers and come up with a story. Lizzie hadn't a clue what he meant, but it felt bad. Bill had ushered her out of the back of the tent to where a car waited, anonymous with blacked-out windows. On the way out, Lizzie had caught a glimpse of the packed marquee. 200 people, the girls all dressed up in red wigs with sparkles in their hair to look like Celia Jones, clutching books and silver pens. They looked so happy and excited that she had felt ashamed. In a moment, some flunky would get up on the stage, tell them that Lizzie Kingdom wasn't going to be able to come after all, and there would be tears and complaints, and none of it would touch her because she would be miles away by then, cocooned in the world that Bill had created for her, protected and adrift at the same time. She wanted to talk to Dudley. She wanted it so badly she was on the edge of screaming at Bill to give her the phone back. She felt a brief, vicious flash of anger that Amelia had done this to him. Stupid cow. How could she be so careless as to fall downstairs? And how had she managed to kill herself? If she'd broken her arm, she could have done an interview for a magazine or two, all brave and smiling through the pain, and made herself some cash so that she wasn't always leeching off Dudley. As soon as the thought was formed, she felt ashamed all over again. Amelia was dead. It was horrific. She remembered Johnny in his page boy's outfit 10 years ago. He would be 16 now, and his sister was dead. Lizzie dug in the pocket of her jacket and took out a bag of marzipan fruits. The rich smell mingled with that of cat's nail varnish and filled the back of the car. Fortnum's had seen her snacking on some of their sweets during a documentary behind the scenes of Stars of the Dance, and sent her a bag every week now. She'd never been able to resist sugar in whatever form it was presented, even though her dentist told her she would have false teeth by the time she was 30. It was comfort eating,
she supposed, and that meant extra time in the gym. Amelia. Lizzie bit hard into the marzipan centre. She had always disliked Dudley's wife, even though she hadn't met her often. Their paths crossed mainly at parties and premieres. Amelia had been a pretty, waif-like blonde, who had never really found a role for herself. She'd tried modelling and had some auditions for TV, or so she had confided to Lizzie, and she had featured in a number of celebrity magazines. Periodically there were articles about her latest project, pictures of her posing at Oakhanger Hall, looking glamorous in the gardens, or baking up a storm in the kitchen, but none of her plans seemed to come to anything. Lizzie, who could not remember a time when she had not been working, had always thought Amelia was lazy. Everyone else seemed to feel sorry for her. Even Bill, tougher than old boots, had once said he thought Amelia was as fragile as a butterfly. Lizzie had thought she was a different sort of insect, a parasitic one.
Shit, Bill said suddenly. This is just everywhere. The media are crucifying Dudley.
Can I have my phone back, please? Lizzie said. I want to talk to Dudley, and I really need to tweet how sorry I am to hear about Amelia. She waited, but Bill was engrossed in scanning his own phone and didn't move. So was Kat. The brightness of the screens lit up the interior of the car and made Lizzie's eyes sting. I don't see what fault it is of Dudley's, Lizzie said, annoyed that they were both ignoring her. I mean, he wasn't even at Oakhanger when it happened, was he? He told me he was going to see friends in Brighton. Bill interrupted her.
They're saying that Amelia may have taken her own life, he said. That she threw herself down the stairs because Dudley had told her a couple of weeks ago he was divorcing her. Shit. Fuck, this is a mess.
He shot Lizzie a quick look over his shoulder.
Did you know about the divorce? Did Dudley tell you?
Lizzie wriggled on the sumptuous leather seat. She had the same feeling she had had on numerous occasions as a child, a sense that something very bad was about to happen. And it wasn't her fault, but that was beside the point, and she would take the blame anyway. He might have mentioned it to me last month, she muttered.
Shit, Lizzie! Bill exploded again. He mentioned it to you before he told his wife? What is wrong with the pair of you?
We're friends, Lizzie said mutinously.
We've been friends since I was 6 years old, Bill, so it's no wonder we're close, is it? Dudley confides in me.
Bill muttered another expletive under his breath.
It's unhealthy, Lizzie, he said. Frankly, you both come across as weird and needy.
Lizzie ignored him and looked out of the window. It was dark outside the car now, the last vestiges of evening light fading from the sky. They were driving fast, on a motorway somewhere, but she had no idea where they were, or where they were going. No one had told her. Suddenly, she felt so tired. They moved her around like a piece on a chessboard, and never told her a damn thing. Bill turned in his seat so that he could look at her properly. Lizzie felt a rush of irritation that another lecture would be forthcoming, and kept her gaze firmly averted from his.
Did you also know that Amelia had been in hospital? Bill asked, his voice deceptively soft. Apparently, she was suffering from depression, and she'd become addicted to prescription painkillers. She was taking them for migraines or something, and seeing a whole raft of specialists.
He shook his head irritably.
Whatever. Anyway, Dudley had been paying for her rehab at Melton Abbey until last week, when she went home to Oakhanger.
Lizzie hunched deeper into her jacket. She felt a coldness seeping through her body, a mind-numbing, bone-crunching chill, like frost setting hard. She had had no idea that Amelia was ill. She thought about the paralysing sense of despair that depression brought with it, the flat darkness that stretched forever, the lack of any sense of joy, and the hideous loneliness. She knew what it felt like to be on one side of that plate glass pane, so that nothing, no sound, no sight, no love could touch her. She'd lived with that, off and on, for so many years, ever since her mother's death. It seemed she had more in common with Amelia than she had known. Lizzie shuddered. Desperately she rummaged in her pockets, but the bag of marzipan, she was disappointed to find, was empty. Instead, she let her fingers creep to her throat, and the oak leaf necklace she always wore. It was a talisman. It grounded her. "Where are you getting this stuff from?" she asked. "It sounds like tabloid rubbish to me. You know how they exaggerate." She tucked her chin into her collar, seeking warmth, but the car was stuffy, and the coldness was within her, not outside. "We've all been depressed," she said, hating herself even as she said the words. "It doesn't mean you throw yourself down the stairs."
Jesus, Lizzie, Bill said. "We are talking clinical depression here, not feeling a bit low one day. Sometimes it's hard to like you, you know."
"Don't say that, Bill," Kat said, putting a comforting hand on Lizzie's arm. "Don't forget what Lizzie's been through herself. Can't you see she's hurting? She doesn't mean to sound callous."
Lizzie felt Kat's hand on her sleeve. Kat's touch was comforting. It said that she understood that Lizzie was miserable, lost in painful memories, and that she wanted to pretend she wasn't. In that moment, Lizzie hated her for knowing. The trouble was that Kat had known her forever, since she had been a baby. Kat, her mother's best friend, had stepped in when a car crash had claimed Annie Kingdom at a shockingly young age. She'd taken Lizzie under her wing, attempting to soften the haphazard and destructive parenting methods of Lizzie's father. She'd been in Lizzie's life ever since. There could be no secrets from Kat. She shook Kat's hand off. She wasn't going to show her that it mattered. "I still don't see that it's Dudley's fault, even if Amelia did kill herself," she argued. "They haven't been close for years. They never saw each other. It was as though they were already separated, really, and Amelia must have known that Duds would want a divorce sooner or later."
"Amelia's friends are queuing up to say how unhappy she was."
Bill was scrolling through his Twitter feed now.
"Jeez, this is bad. They're saying she killed herself because Dudley spent all his time with you."
"It's nothing to do with me," Lizzie said through her teeth.
"And do they know it's suicide? It might just be an accident."
"Or murder," Kat said. "One of the gossip sites is insinuating Dudley might have arranged it."
Her head was bent, long dark hair falling forward to hide her expression. Lizzie thought she sounded excited.
"They say he wanted to save on the settlement, so he bumped her off."
Lizzie felt a clutch of fear. "They're saying Dudley killed her? That's just—" She raised her hands in despair. "Please stop this, Kat. It's stupid, and you're scaring me now." Neither Bill nor Kat paid her the slightest notice. They were both too engrossed in the breaking news.
"Didn't they have a prenup agreement?" Bill was saying. "Christ, doesn't everyone have one these days?"
"They married so young." Kat looked up from her phone. "Don't you remember, Bill? It was very romantic. Love at first sight. Amelia was only about 17 and Dudley not much more. They married at Oakhanger and there were thrones and a crystal horse-drawn carriage, and they released rare butterflies."
"Which all died because they couldn't cope with the British climate," Lizzie interrupted. "The RSPCA threatened to prosecute Dudley for cruelty." The scar in her palm itched sharply. She clenched her fingers over it. She hadn't thought about Dudley and Amelia's wedding for years. It hadn't been a favourite memory. Bill made a huffing sound.
"Cruelty, eh? That seems like a metaphor for the whole marriage."
He shook his head.
"Whether it's murder or suicide, this is a god-awful mess."
"Hello?" Lizzie waved a hand. "Excuse me, why can't it just be a simple accident? Horrible, I know." She winced.
But it doesn't have to be either sinister or Dudley's fault.
Quite right, babes,
Kat said, in the sort of absent-minded voice that Lizzie knew meant she was paying no attention at all.
Although the BBC is saying that the police are investigating.
Good, Lizzie said. Perhaps that will shut everyone up. She sat forward. I'd like my phone back now, please, Bill, and I'd also like to be taken to London. I don't know where we're going, but I need to be back for rehearsals for Stars of the Dance next week.
I think that would be a bad idea, Bill said slowly. You'll come in for a lot of flack, especially as Dudley's taking part too. Perhaps you should lie low for a week or so.
Lizzie sat up straighter. What? Why?
Dudley's dropped out of Stars of the Dance, Kat interrupted. His people are making an announcement in 15 minutes. She looked at Lizzie. Do you think you should say something too?
No, Lizzie said before she could finish. No way! This has absolutely nothing to do with me.
I agree, Bill said. With any luck, they'll pull this week's show anyway as a mark of respect, since it's only 2 days away. A couple of the other contestants were Amelia's friends, weren't they?
He didn't wait for Lizzie to respond.
But then it's back to business. We don't want it to look like it was in any way Lizzie's fault, no matter what social media is saying.
Lulu Stars is giving a live interview on A-Listed, Kat reported. She says that Amelia was depressed because she thought she could never compete with Lizzie.
Kat turned up the volume, and the tinny sound of Lulu's voice echoed around the car. Amelia said Lizzie Kingdom already had it all, but she wanted Dudley as well. Lizzie shuddered to hear the naked excitement in the interviewer's voice.
You mean Amelia thought they were having an affair?
Oh, God, no. Lulu sounded contemptuous. Lizzie's kind of sexless, isn't she? But she and Dudley were so cute together, like they were still 6 years old. Amelia said she couldn't compete with that sort of friendship. She never got a look in. Why are people making this story up about me? Lizzie locked her fingers together so tightly she heard her bones crack. Heard, too, the thread of hysteria in her voice. Amelia Lester falls down the stairs and I'm somehow to blame? It's horrible. Her words caught on a sob.
I did tell you, Bill said heavily. I did tell you to keep the hell away from Dudley Lester, but you wouldn't listen.
Now isn't the time, Bill,
Kat said sharply. Her voice became soothing as she turned back to Lizzie.
We all know it's not your fault, honey, she said. But you know how it works. The media want to use your name for the publicity, that's all.
She rummaged in her bag.
Here, have some of these.
Lizzie heard the rattle of pills.
Just a little one. You'll feel much better.
I don't want your fucking pills. Tears filled Lizzie's eyes. She despised herself. Why am I such a child? Why can't I deal with this? Why did bloody Amelia Lester have to die? I want to talk to Dudley, she said forlornly. He needs me. There's no one else he can talk to.
The less you have to do with this, the better, Bill said. Normally I'd be arguing for you to get all the publicity you can, but this is toxic, Lizzie. You need to keep out of it for the sake of your career. Anyway, Dudley's got his family. Let him talk to them.
Dudley and I always support each other, Lizzie said. It's what we do.
That's what I'm trying to tell you, Bill said grimly. That's the problem.
We're only trying to look after you, honey, Kat said. Really, we are. Bill's right. This could ruin everything for you. It's got to be handled properly.
I know, Lizzie said. Bill and Kat were right. This whole scandal could ruin her image and her career. She had to be careful. Suddenly she felt exhausted. The need to go to Dudley, to comfort him when so much horrible stuff was swirling around, was deep and instinctive. But it wasn't stronger than the survival instinct. That was the deepest and most visceral of all. She had worked so hard for everything she had, faced down the scandal of her parents' disastrous marriage and her sleazy father's endless affairs. A shiver racked her.
Lizzie's kind of sexless, isn't she?
She could still hear the bite in Lulu's tone. So what if it was true? If she controlled every detail of her life and her image, it couldn't go wrong. Or so she had thought until now. She needed more than the necklace to ground her now that the world was swinging violently awry. She burrowed into the pocket of her coat again. Deep in the corner, next to the empty sweet wrappers, she found the little perfume bottle. The scent had been her mother's favourite, or so she'd been told, a classic of the 90s, smelling of summer flowers and vanilla. The bottle was long empty, but the perfume lingered like the memory of a sweet dream, and it was one of the few small mementos she had. She thought of the pitifully small collection of her mother's belongings that she had salvaged after she had died. She'd been like a child thief, surreptitiously gathering things up when her father's back was turned. A discarded book here, a t-shirt there, a cheap bracelet, even a battered phone card and a bus ticket. The housekeeper had bundled up all her mother's gorgeous clothes, bags and shoes, and thrown them away in plastic bags. Her books had been given to a charity shop. Her jewellery, Lizzie suspected, had been given to her father's new girlfriend. Harry Kingdom hadn't been the subtle type. They had only been married for a few years, and Lizzie thought it had been easy for him to erase Annie Bowling from his life, burning the photographs, obliterating all evidence that she had existed. The one thing it hadn't been possible to obliterate was the 4-year-old girl with his red hair, but Annie's brown eyes and sharp, curious mind. Although Lizzie sometimes thought that if her father could have got rid of her too, he would have done. Consigning her to Kat's care and then sending her to boarding school had been his way of dealing with her, until he had realised that he could profit from her talent. Her fingers rubbed back and forth over the familiar shape of the perfume bottle. She knew all the lines and curves of it by touch alone, and usually the contact with one of her mother's possessions brought her comfort, and sometimes more. Images of her mother, an echo of her emotions. Not tonight, though. Tonight, she felt nothing. There was no comfort. She felt utterly alone. The old scar on the palm of her right hand itched viciously, a reminder of Amelia and Oakhanger, and the nightmare of the wedding. "I don't know where you're taking me," she said, "but I want to see Jules. She'll let me stay for a few days." It was the place she always ran to when she was in trouble. Her cousin, Juliet Carey, was the only person who treated her as though she was normal. Not that Lizzie knew what normal was anymore, if she ever had. But Juliet's chaotic household was the closest to it that she could find. She saw Bill and Kat exchange a look, and then Kat give a tiny nod, and Bill dove in his pocket and extracted her phone. Lizzie saw him scroll through the numbers and punch in the one for Jules before he handed it to her. The number rang and rang. Jules didn't believe in answering services.
"Didn't Jules say they were all going to France for a couple of weeks of camping?"
Kat said. Both her tone and her expression conveyed her utter bafflement at the thought of spending any time in a tent. For Kat, even the most luxurious glamping would be too primitive. Oh yeah. With a sigh, Lizzie ended the connection. She really was on her own then. Her only close friend was working abroad, and there was no one else she would want to turn to at a time like this. No other friends, no family. Only a raft of acquaintances who would sell her out to the press as soon as look at her. Immediately, her phone rang. "Don't answer it," Bill said. "Turn it off." Lizzie thought about ignoring him and calling Dudley, but then Kat exclaimed,
"Dudley's giving a press conference."
Lizzie switched off the phone and stuffed it into her pocket. Kat glanced up at her, then back at her screen. Once again, the tinny sound of voices filled the car.
I'm distraught at the loss of my beautiful wife, Amelia.
Dudley's voice sounded blurred by tears.
It was a terrible accident. I don't even want to address the other horrible rumours which have already sprung up, and are nothing but hurtful lies. I only ask that my family and I are given respect whilst we grieve.
Dear God, Bill said. He looks terrible. And he sounds like one of those guys whose wife disappears and he makes a public plea for her to come home, knowing all along that he's murdered her and hidden the body. Jeez.
Kat's reply was overwhelmed by the cacophony from the phone as reporters scrambled to ask questions.
Turn it off,
Lizzie said irritably.
Please, Kat, I'm begging you.
Tears stung her eyelids. She wanted to speak to Dudley, to comfort him and draw comfort from him just as she had when they were growing up together. She wanted to hug him and feel his arms about her. They made each other feel safe. Yet she had a horrible suspicion that everything had changed and they could never be so close or so happy ever again. It had all seemed so simple, the two of them against the world. Yet Amelia had always been there, even when Lizzie had almost forgotten her. Her shadow had always been cast across them, the figure glimpsed out of the corner of her eye, the spectre. Kat finally snapped off the sound on her phone, just as Bill's mobile rang again. He listened in sharp silence.
There's been a change of plan, he said as he ended the call. We will be going back to London after all. The police want to interview you tomorrow, Lizzie.
Fine, Lizzie said sulkily.
Whatever. I don't know anything anyway. The lawyers will brief you first thing, Bill said.
Fine, Lizzie said again with a half shrug.
This is serious,
Bill said with a warning note in his voice.
They haven't dismissed the possibility of murder.
Lizzie rolled her eyes. Bill, this is ridiculous.
Just do what the lawyers tell you, Bill said.
He settled his shoulders back against the seat and fumbled for a cigar. Must you smoke? Lizzie said. It's bad for your health. Bill swore, but he put the cigar away. The car took the next motorway exit and headed back the way they had come. Soon there was nothing around Lizzie but the rustle and hum of the car as it sped through the dark. Nothing but the endless photos on her phone screen, showing her laughing with Dudley on the set of Stars of the Dance, juxtaposed with ones of Amelia looking frail and ill. Nothing but the tumbling words of hate mail already flooding into her social media accounts. The images spun a pattern in Lizzie's head, over and over, around and around, until she finally slept. Chapter 6. Amy, Sheen Palace, June 1550. I met her first, on my wedding day. Robert's elder brother John had married the day before us, in a great ceremony of pomp and display. The boy, King Edward, had attended, and had taken much pleasure at the masques and banqueting, which had surprised me, for I'd known him only as a studious youth, not much given to laughter. Robert had presented me to him when first I had come to court. I had already divined that he was serious to the point of tedium, which, I suppose, was all very well for a king, but made him a dull companion. Robert told me he was very clever, but that did not impress me. Intelligence without wit seemed dry to me. He had been flanked by his advisers, Robert's father, Lord Warwick, all elegance and dark intensity, and the Duke of Somerset. The two men seemed to tower over the boy king like tall trees above a sapling, blocking out the light. John Dudley had married the eldest of Somerset's daughters, Anne Seymour, a pale and pious creature who was very aware of her own value. My marriage to Robert was an altogether smaller affair, as befitted his status as a younger son, and mine as a gentleman's daughter. There were sore heads and dull eyes from the previous night's revels, but all the nobility was there for this pale echo of a Dudley marriage. It should have been the best day of my life. Amongst that congregation of the nobility in St. George's Chapel, I saw her at once, the Princess Elizabeth. It was not that she was particularly animated, or brightly dressed, or hung with jewels. She was quiet, and pale, and demure, her skin like fine Chinese porcelain. But her hair blazed like fire, and the contrast of that red gold with the dark brown of her eyes was arresting, a physical shock. I knew her immediately. The Princess Elizabeth was half-sister to the king, daughter of the scandalous Queen Anne Boleyn, her life already mired in bloodshed and treason. Robert had spoken of her a little, for they had shared a tutor when young.
"She is clever," he had said, "as clever as any man, and witty and sharp as a needle."
He had not mentioned that she was beautiful, and for some reason this disturbed rather than pleased me. Perhaps Elizabeth's looks were not of such conventional prettiness as mine, but it was a woman's lot to be prized for her beauty and sweet nature rather than her wit. King Henry had worshipped Anne Boleyn for the quickness of her mind, and that had not served her to any great purpose. Yet suddenly, I was not so pleased with the portrait that Robert had commissioned of me from the king's miniaturist as a wedding gift. It seemed that with me, he saw only the surface, but with the Lady Elizabeth, he saw and valued what was beneath. Telling myself that I was full of foolish imaginings, I concentrated on the words of the marriage service, and on my new husband. He looked gravely handsome. Although he smiled at me, on one occasion, I saw him glancing over the heads of the congregation, as his gaze sought her out. Yet it was nothing, or so I told myself. There were many women present, and many of those smiled at Robert. I could not be jealous of them all. When the service was concluded, my father swept me up into his embrace, kissing me exuberantly on both cheeks. He was pleased with me, and very proud, and that warmed me. My mother, too. Finally, she had relented and given us her blessing, although I sensed that beneath the good wishes, she had not changed her opinion of Robert and his reckless ambition. I did not ask her, though. I did not want to know the truth and damage the bond between us. I was surrounded by friends and family congratulating me. The faces spun about me like a whirling top, and in the melee I lost sight of Robert. It was odd how even at my own wedding I seemed to get lost in the crowd, overlooked amongst the peacocking crowd of courtiers, and without my husband, I felt inconsequential and vulnerable. The king and his attendants swept out to attend the feast. My new father-in-law strode away without a glance in my direction, whilst the Seymour girls looked down their aristocratic noses and whispered behind their hands. My mother was tugging on my arm. "Where is Robert?" I did not know. "I'll find him," I said. She matched my steps back down the empty aisle of the chapel. I wished she would not accompany me, but did not feel I could dismiss her. Now that the church was no longer crammed with guests, it looked huge and grand, a whispering gallery of all the moments in time and history the place had witnessed. Yet the whispering was real. I could hear it, soft but persistent.
"I will not fail you. I'll never fail you. I swear it."
I found them behind a pillar on the south side of the transept, where the sunlight fell through the window glass to make distorted puddles of light on the stone. The light was also on her upturned face, for Robert was taller than she. Once again, I was struck by her pallor and delicacy, so much at odds with the fierce will that showed in her eyes. They were standing very close together, and their hands were clasped. I saw a strand of her red gold hair brush against his cheek. My mother gave a sharp gasp beside me. Robert straightened, turned. I could not understand the expression I saw on his face. It was too complex, too far from anything in my experience. There was love and protectiveness, but not the lust I had expected. Nor did he look guilty or ashamed. He let go of her hands so slowly, and then he bowed to her with elaborate charm. "I am sorry that you do not feel well enough to attend the wedding feast, madam," he said. "I will see you are escorted to your rooms." Elizabeth nodded. "Thank you." Her golden brown gaze dwelt on my face for a moment, mercilessly devoid of warmth. "I wish you joy on your marriage, Mistress Dudley," she said, then slipped past me and disappeared into the shadows of the church. Mother opened her mouth to speak, and I pinched her arm hard to quiet her. "There you are, my dear," I said lightly to Robert, as though we had been married for years, as though there was nothing amiss at all. "Your father bids us to feast. Once you have seen the Lady Elizabeth safely to her quarters, of course." And I stood aside to let him follow her down the nave, and did not look at him at all. Chapter 7. Lizzie. Present day. Lizzie woke suddenly. In her dream, she had been falling, the crystal gazing ball shattering in her hands, spilling blood across the flagstones of the floor. She lay still, gasping for breath, as her mind caught up with reality, her sweat-drenched pajamas a pounding in her head. She opened her eyes and saw the familiar outlines of her bedroom in the half-light of an early autumn dawn. The thundering of her heart settled a little. She was at home. She was alone. And she knew she ought to feel reassured, but the dregs of the dream still lingered, and her mind was shadowed with something formless and dark. The day before had been vile. The lawyers had arrived to brief her at 8 for her interview at Blackfriars Police Station at 11. She'd only been listening to them with half an ear, because, really, Amelia Lester's death had nothing to do with her, and she was only helping police with their inquiries to build up a fuller picture of Dudley and Amelia's life. Or so she told herself. She had toyed with her fruit juice, whilst a smooth corporate brief told her the facts of Amelia's death, that she had been found by one of the cleaners at the bottom of the stairs, on the afternoon of the 8th of September. She had been alone in the house at the time, except for a couple of members of staff who had been busy and had apparently heard nothing. Her neck had been broken, and there were a couple of bruises on her face, but she had no other injuries. That was as far as the facts went. The rest was just lurid speculation. Lizzie had hidden her shock at hearing the stark details. It sounded a horrible way to die. So sudden, and so lonely. She knew that the lawyers, like Bill, thought she was a cold bitch because she didn't cry for Amelia. They were as practiced at hiding their emotions as she was, but she could see the disgust in their eyes. She knew she had to be strong, though. With Dudley in pieces, there was no one else. She didn't want Kat's gossipy sympathy. From the earliest age, she was accustomed to dealing with crap all by herself. She just wanted to get on with it. When Lizzie arrived at the police station, it was clear someone had tipped off the press. They had to fight their way through the crowds just to get inside. The legal team stuck to her like limpets, often jumping in before she had the chance to answer any very simple questions, which Lizzie thought made her look guilty and stupid. By the time she left 2 hours later, she was in a foul mood, and had a blinding headache. Outside, the crowd had doubled in size. Dudley had arrived, looking attractively haggard and rumpled. His tired face had lit up when he saw Lizzie, but Bill wouldn't let her speak to him and shoved her into the waiting limo like a prison officer hustling away a convict. Bill and Kat took her off to some sort of safe house after that. Presumably a place Bill used for all the celebs he managed who blotted their careers with drink driving or drugs offences. Lizzie had never been there before and found it infinitely depressing. There was nothing to do except scroll through social media, absorbing all the poison people were saying about her, until she felt sick to the stomach. She didn't want to look at it, yet somehow she couldn't help herself. It was a compulsion. She tried to distract herself with music videos and films, but she couldn't concentrate for more than a minute or two, jumping up, pacing the flat, whilst Bill was endlessly on the phone or flicking through news coverage, and Kat chatted on her phone to family and friends about all kinds of inconsequential things. By the evening, Lizzie was at screaming pitch. Then Dudley did another press conference, and they all crowded around the screen.
"I'm innocent of any crime,"
Dudley said, so plaintive and puppyish with his sad face on.
"The false accusations and fake news are truly hurtful at this difficult time. I can only hope that the police will swiftly exonerate me, and I can be left to grieve in peace."
"I'm going home," Lizzie said, pushing aside the box of chicken tacos that Kat was offering her. "I've had enough." She wanted to see Dudley, or, at the very least, talk to him. She rang his number as soon as she got in the taxi, but the call went to voicemail immediately. She felt annoyed that he was call-screening her along with everyone else. "Dudley," she said when the tape beeped at her to leave a message. "I'm thinking of you. Call me when you can." But he hadn't called back, and when she rang again, the line was dead. Now she sat up in bed and reached automatically for the phone, only to find that the battery was flat. Swearing under her breath, she groped for the charger lead and plugged it in. In a minute, she would try calling Dudley again. The flat was quiet. That was unusual. In theory, Lizzie lived alone, but it never seemed to be like that. There was always someone hanging around, usually Kat, or her family and friends, or Lizzie's ex-bandmates, or Dudley, with or without one of his brothers, or other friends, people whose connection to her was so tenuous that sometimes she had no idea who they were. Today, however, there was a stillness about the place that would have frightened her if she had allowed herself to think about it. Lizzie stretched, and finding that she felt wide awake, got out of bed and wandered over to the huge windows that looked out across the river. She hadn't thought to draw the curtains the previous night, and the whole panorama of London was spread out in front of her in the sullen grey of a Monday morning, the dome of St. Paul's Cathedral piercing the sky just to the northeast. The river, greyest of all, shone like dull silk under the twinkle of a million lights from cranes, office buildings, and vehicles. Although no sound penetrated the triple glazing up here, Lizzie knew she only needed to open the door and step onto the balcony to hear the roar of the city, to smell it and taste it. London was feral, and she loved that about it. It helped her feel alive. The TV remote was lying on the table by the window, next to her computer tablet. Lizzie felt her palms itch with the urge to pick up one or both. She wondered what people were saying about her this morning. None of it could be good, she was sure of that. The compulsion to read the whole horrible, sickening onslaught of comment felt almost too strong to resist. She didn't know why she would want to torture herself with it, knowing it would make her feel worse than she already did. For some reason, she had become almost as much of a focus for public disapproval as Dudley had in the wake of Amelia's death. People were so fickle. She'd gone from being the sweetheart of children's TV to being a pariah. When she gave in to temptation, opened her tablet and clicked on the news app, it was even worse than she had imagined. The story of Amelia's death, and the fact that she and Dudley had been questioned by police, led many of the reports. Rumours and conspiracy theories appeared to be rife. Suggestions that Amelia had been pushed down the stairs, reports that witnesses had seen someone lurking around the house that afternoon. It was all very sensational, and Dudley seemed to be making matters a great deal worse for himself, protesting his innocence of any crime, giving interviews, sounding like an aggrieved child. Lizzie put the tablet down and turned away from the window. She had rehearsals for Stars of the Dance that morning. The show was going ahead, and Lizzie was determined to be there. She was a professional, and it was work, whatever Bill's advice. A car was coming for her at 10. She felt a pang of nerves at the thought of facing everyone. Not that it mattered. She had a horrible feeling that when the time came for the public vote, she would be sent home from the show. The cutesy little dance routines that had played up her fun and wholesome image suddenly seemed to jar horribly with the reality of Amelia's death. The shower was hot, refreshing, and yet Lizzie's mind still felt fuzzy and disconnected in some way. The nightmare lingered, reminding her of Amelia and Dudley's wedding, and the sense of terror as the crystal smashed, and she'd felt as though she was falling. Was that how Amelia had felt in those brief few seconds before she broke her neck? Cold sweat broke out over Lizzie's body, and she grabbed a towel and wrapped it tightly around her. She gathered her stuff together automatically and shoved it into her bag. She needed something to help her focus this morning. She needed to ground herself. She glanced at the drawer in her bedside table, but then she hesitated. When she had touched the perfume bottle 2 nights ago, nothing had happened. She had been unable to connect to her mother's memory, or derive any comfort or reassurance from the link to the past. Suppose that happened again? She used her gift of psychometry so rarely. It was secret and precious. If she reached out and failed, she knew she would feel even more empty and alone than she did now. She slid the drawer open. It was full of a mixture of lip salve, earplugs, pens, crumpled tissues, a writing pad, headache pills. Her fingers touched a plastic wrapper, and she pulled it out from beneath the pile of litter. A program for an iconic rock concert in the 1980s. Really, she should treat it better, but she needed it near her when she slept, and somehow it felt appropriate for one of the few mementos her mother had left her to be tangled up with lipstick and tissues and powder. She took the program out of the plastic bag, her fingers sliding over the smooth cover. For a moment, nothing happened, and the gap of time left a moment for her to worry that the gift, if that was what it was, really had left her. But then the sensations came to her. It was not simply a vision. It felt as though she was actually there. She could feel the sun on her, fiercely hot, and the spray of water that hit her bare arms like a cold shock. She heard the roar of the crowd and sensed the electric atmosphere about her. The world was alight. She felt excited, pulsing with adrenaline and intense pleasure. She was Annie Bowling, 20 years old. There was so much she wanted to do, so much of life to explore. A boy was sitting beside her. She was holding his hand, but they could not keep still. The music was around them and in them. It was a part of them, and they were a part of the whole, and they leaped up and danced and kissed, and Lizzie could feel the tumble of emotion inside, the love, the happiness, the sweet sense of fun, a life that was simple and easy. Lizzie opened her eyes. Her cheeks were wet with tears. The feeling of happiness was fading away now. leaving only an echo of emotion. She touched the programme one more time. Live Aid, the 13th of July, 1985. At the bottom, beneath a picture that was still crayon bright, were the words, "This programme saves lives." It had certainly saved hers, on more than one occasion. Connecting to the mother she had never really known, knowing that there was a time when her mother had been happy, when her life had been uncomplicated and exciting, gave Lizzie strength. Carefully, she put the programme away in its bag and slipped it back into its place beneath the makeup and the pills. She felt bereft, but steadier too. When she came out of the bedroom, Kat was in the living room, perched on the leather sofa, waiting to go to the dance studio with her. Kat had her own key to Lizzie's flat, and came and went as she pleased. In the past, Lizzie hadn't minded. Kat had been a part of her life forever, and it seemed natural. Today, though, for the first time, it irritated her that Kat would just walk in unannounced, essentially doing her job as she had done it for the past 10 years or more. I'm an ungrateful bitch, Lizzie thought, and gave Kat an extra warm hug to make up for her thoughts. Are you ready to go, babes? Kat was looking very smart, from which Lizzie judged that the press must be outside. She made no reference to Lizzie flouncing out on her and Bill the previous day, taking it in her stride, the way she had dealt with so many other dramas in Lizzie's life. Sure. Lizzie picked up her gym bag. She still felt jittery and vulnerable, not wanting to face the waiting cameras. She straightened her shoulders. If Jules was here, her cousin would tell her to get some steel in her backbone. They went out into the foyer, and Kat called the lift. It was so quiet in here, protected, soundless, a padded box. It was almost a shock when the lift doors opened and one of Lizzie's neighbours, a hedge fund manager called Natasha, stepped out and smiled at her. Hi, Lizzie, she said. I guessed the Paps were all here for you. Sorry, Lizzie said, cringing a little. I seem to be bringing the place into disrepute. Kat looked up from her phone in surprise, as though anyone would find press interest a problem, and Lizzie and Natasha exchanged another smile as they passed. There was silence again as the lift descended. Kat seemed engrossed in WhatsApp. Lizzie tapped her foot. The lift doors opened. Lizzie stepped forward. Whoa! Kat caught her arm at the same moment that the noise and chaos hit like a tidal wave. Normally, the security guards kept the press firmly outside the building, but today, the elegant marble-floored foyer was full of people. At least 3 uniformed security officers were struggling to restrain a slight blonde youth in jeans and a grey hoodie who was fighting them off as though his life depended on it. Jason, the normally imperturbable duty manager, was shouting urgently down the phone whilst people flooded in from the street, taking pictures and videos. I want to see Lizzie Kingdom, the boy was shouting. I know she's here. Let me see her. Sir, one of the security guards was saying, I'm asking you to stop fighting and lower your voice. Shit, Kat said. She had frozen on the spot, her hand still resting on Lizzie's arm. That's Johnny Robsart, Amelia's little brother. She hit the door's open button and tried to drag Lizzie back into the lift, but it was too late. It had shot off back up to the top floor. Shit, Kat said again. This is a mess. Johnny struggled out from beneath the weight of security and stared straight at Lizzie. She could see in the teenager the child she had met just the once, at Amelia and Dudley's wedding. The planes and angles of his face had sharpened, and he was painfully thin. The wide hazel eyes she had thought she remembered had darkened to blue and reminded Lizzie of Amelia, although Amelia had always referred to her eye colour as lilac. Johnny's skin was so white it was almost translucent, and there were purple smudges beneath his eyes. For one long moment they looked at each other, and Lizzie felt the shock of his grief and anger like a physical blow. Then, as he started forward towards her, One of the guards caught him in an arm lock and wrenched him backwards. "For God's sake," Lizzie said. "Let go of him." "Lizzie!" Johnny screamed. "Help me!" He started to cry. "I only want to talk. I need your help." His voice broke on the words. Lizzie flinched. She saw Johnny try to turn his head away to hide his tears, but the way that the security guard was holding him made it impossible. His raw vulnerability was on show for all to see. He twisted from one side to the other, desperately trying to free himself. It was painful to witness so much distress, and for one terrible moment, it struck a chord deep inside Lizzie, drawing her back, reminding her of the dark, suffocating press of her own grief when her mother had died. A grief she had pushed away for so many years, until finally it had refused to be ignored. She swallowed hard and tore her gaze away from Johnny, stepping back, bumping into Kat in her eagerness to get away from the scene and the memories it brought with it. "Let him go," she said. Her words came out hoarsely, and she cleared her throat. "If he needs to talk to me, then let him." "I wouldn't advise it, Miss Kingdom." Jason had come to stand beside her. "Mr. Robsart is disruptive and could be dangerous. The police are on their way." "Lizzie!" Johnny yelled over his shoulder at her as they dragged him away from her. "Please, let me talk to you."
"He needs help," Kat said, putting an arm about Lizzie. "Come away, hun. Let the professionals deal with it. You need to get to the studio. We'll be late."
"I don't care," Lizzie said. She shook off Kat's restraining arm and hurried across the concourse. Johnny was being manhandled towards the door, and the crowd retreated before him, with camera phones still flashing. "Miss Kingdom," Jason interposed his bulk between her and Johnny. "Wait. Let go of my brother, or I'll have you up on an assault charge." Lizzie turned to find herself looking into the impossibly dark, impossibly angry eyes of Arthur Robsart. Even though she wasn't touching Johnny, and Arthur's words weren't addressed to her, she found herself stepping back at the authority in his tone. She hadn't seen Arthur since Amelia's wedding 10 years before, yet for a moment it felt as though no time had elapsed at all. She remembered the way he had bound up the cut on her hand, with a dispassionate efficiency that hadn't hidden the fact he was exasperated with her. The look he was giving her now made his manner then seem positively warm. The security guard dropped Johnny as though he'd been scalded. Johnny half stumbled, half fell into Lizzie's arms, only to be wrenched away from her by a blonde girl who had dashed inside in Arthur's wake. Lizzie vaguely recognised her as Anna, Amelia's younger sister. It had been a while since they'd met.
"Darling Johnny," Anna was saying, Don't cry. It will all be all right."
She glared at Lizzie like a tigress as she cradled Johnny close, stroking his hair.
"Haven't you done enough harm, monopolising Dudley?" she demanded. "You're not getting your claws into Johnny as well."
Lizzie's mouth dropped open in shock. She knew it was unlikely that Anna would be her biggest fan, but the naked hostility took her aback. "I was only trying to help," she said.
"Well, don't."
Anna had an arm about her brother and was steering him towards the exit now.
"Arthur."
She jerked her head towards the door.
"We're leaving."
Arthur, who had been talking swiftly and quietly to Jason, broke off with a nod and followed his siblings out of the wide plate glass doors of the lobby and down the steps to a waiting taxi. Kat waited a discreet interval and then came steaming across to Lizzie's side, all outraged indignation now that Anna had gone.
"How dare she speak to you like that?" Kat fumed. "She's bloody rude."
"She's upset," Lizzie said mechanically. She was staring after the family and caught one last glance of Johnny's pinched, unhappy face and those haunted blue eyes before he disappeared into the car. "Her sister's just died," she said. "Cut her some slack." Kat shrugged, clearly unsympathetic. "I don't see why she's trying to blame you," she said. "That was totally uncalled for." "Everyone is blaming me," Lizzie said tiredly. "It helps to have a target at a time like this."
Then let them blame Dudley, Kat said. It's his fault, not yours.
Lizzie pulled a face. The trouble was that she knew there had been some truth in Anna's words. She could shrug it off. If Dudley had preferred to spend time with her rather than with his wife, was that her fault? But a small, nagging voice at the back of her mind said she could have behaved differently. She hadn't cared about Amelia's feelings. And now, Amelia was dead.
I didn't know Arthur was in London,
Kat said, as though her celebrity radar had failed her badly.
He's practically a hermit these days.
She opened her eyes wide.
He's a farmer, of all things. Can you believe it?
Sure, Lizzie said. There are a lot of very good-looking farmers around.
But he used to present all those nature and wildlife programmes with cute ducklings and baby birds, Kat protested. He was on the TV, and he did some modelling, and then he gave it all up to go back to university. Beggars belief, doesn't it?
Her expression registered blank incomprehension.
1 minute he's a celeb and coining it in with sponsorship deals, and the next he's mucking out cows. Please, in what universe does that make any sense?
In one you don't inhabit, Lizzie said. She shrugged. Not everyone wants to be a celebrity, Kat. Kat was scrolling through her Facebook feed, talking at the same time as she tapped out messages.
Did you see that the press are linking all the recent deaths in Amelia's family? She asked. They've raked up the story of Amelia's mother and Arthur's fiancé. They're calling them the cursed celebrity family.
That's not very catchy, Lizzie said. Even so, she shuddered. Press stories could be crass and intrusive at the best of times. Introducing some sort of horror story element into a tragedy was unpleasantly sensationalist. Kat, however, seemed hooked.
Oh my God, she said. I'd forgotten how terrible Jenna looked by the end.
She glanced at Lizzie.
Did you ever meet her? Jenna Gascoigne. She was in a few high-profile films, but her career tanked when she started to suffer from anorexia.
Kat paused.
Poor Jenna. She looks like a ghost in this photo. They say she was living on tissues and laxatives. Arthur did his best, but she was beyond help.
He is coming back inside, Lizzie said,
so you'd better stop talking about him.
Her chest tightened with something akin to panic. There was no chance of getting into the car and heading to the studio until the scrum of reporters had eased a little, and the last thing she wanted was Arthur coming in and taking up where Anna had left off. He was crossing the foyer towards them now. Kat smoothed her skirt and stood up a little straighter, smiling as he approached.
Wow,
she breathed in Lizzie's ear.
He is so hot.
Lizzie didn't reply. She would have categorized Arthur as very hot indeed, were it not for the fact that he was looking at her with absolute disdain, which prejudiced her against him quite strongly. The scar on her palm where the crystal had cut her tingled suddenly. She pressed her hands together.
Hi,
Kat said before Arthur could speak. Arthur gave her a cool nod. His gaze was fixed on Lizzie, and again she felt the depth of his disapproval, all the more powerful for not being articulated.
Miss Kingdom, he said formally, I'm Arthur Robsart, Johnny's half-brother. We met once before?
He continued as though indifferent as to whether or not she remembered.
I wanted to apologise on Johnny's behalf. He shouldn't have accosted you like that.
He's upset, Lizzie said. She felt simultaneously relieved that Arthur wasn't going to have a go at her, and protective of Johnny.
I understand how he feels, she said. You must all be going through a horrible time.
Arthur Robsart's mouth flattened with dislike. Evidently, she wasn't entitled to offer sympathy to Amelia's family.
Nevertheless, he said, Johnny won't trouble you again.
He only wanted to talk to me, Lizzie said.
I'm sorry we didn't get the chance.
She waved a vague hand around. Under Arthur's objective scrutiny, she felt embarrassed. The security guards were still standing nearby, in a watchful silence, arms crossed. They were paid to protect her, and they had been doing their job, but it didn't feel like a good excuse.
"As I said," Arthur repeated, "he won't trouble you again."
His expression was cold. He turned to go. "Wait!" Lizzie caught his sleeve. She felt a burn of sensation against her fingers immediately. It was exactly like the feeling she had when she touched her mother's possessions, or read other objects, and yet at the same time it was completely different. She had never experienced any sort of telepathic response when touching people before. Yet now, it was as though she had stepped directly into Arthur Robsart's mind. The emotional connection was sharp, immediate, and shocking. There was a buzzing in her ears like static, and her mind was flooded with Arthur's feelings. She sensed his fierce love and concern for Johnny, and beneath that, a welter of other emotions, impatience, anger, determination, and dislike, all directed towards her, alongside a strong attraction, all the more disturbing for being twinned with such animosity. Lizzie looked up at him, and saw the flare of disbelief in his eyes before he shut all emotion down. The connection between them died abruptly, like a slammed door cutting off sound. She knew Arthur had felt it too, though. She would have known even if she hadn't seen his reaction. She felt completely shaken. She hadn't even realised she could read people's thoughts. It had never happened before. It wasn't the same as reading objects. That was crazy enough, and she kept it to herself like a guilty secret, half believing, half fearing that it was a phenomenon conjured up by her imagination from a desperate desire to connect to her past. She had always assumed, or tried to tell herself, that it only happened because of her sense of closeness to some members of her family, which meant that she associated strong memories or emotions with them. This experience with Arthur Robsart was a whole different thing. She didn't want to go there. She wasn't flaky or into spiritual stuff. She'd never wanted to contact her mother's spirit through a medium or anything like that. The thought made her shudder. "Lizzie?" Kat prompted her, and she realised she was still holding Arthur's sleeve. "Are you okay, babes?" Lizzie let go. "Sorry," she said, a little weakly, not daring to look at Arthur again. I only wanted to say." She risked a quick glance up at him. "I mean, Johnny will get help, won't he? He seemed so upset."
"We'll look after him,"
Arthur said. Without another word, he turned and walked away. "Well," Kat said, staring after him. "That was weird," Lizzie said. "Totally weird." She realised she was physically shaking. "You seemed..." Kat paused delicately. "Smitten?" "Not exactly," Lizzie said. "I don't think he likes me much." "Well," Kat said vaguely, "he probably thinks that you spent too much time with Dudley."
"Whatever!"
Lizzie cut her off. She made a show of checking her watch. She didn't want to talk about it. "We'd better go," she said. "I've wasted enough time." She set off across the foyer to the door. Her car was waiting. The press and the crowd of onlookers turned back towards her, pushing phones and microphones close. "Lizzie, any comment?
"What is your connection to Johnny Robsart?"
"Have you been interviewed by the police about Amelia's death?" Questions, over and over, a cacophony beating down on her, and Lizzie, like the professional she had been from the age of 5, with a smile fixed on her lips. "Excuse me, I'm going to work. I have no comment to make at all." Chapter 8. Amy, Castle Rising, Norfolk, summer 1551. Robert and I were happy that summer of 1551. Or at least, that is how I remember it now. Perhaps time has sweetened my recollection of those days and nights. To begin with, we lodged at Ely Place in Holborn. The old bishop's palace, where the gardens reminded me a little of the country, with their tumble-down walls and secretive orchards, and the nightingales singing. On the hot nights of June, we would run barefoot over the dew-drenched grass and make love beneath the shadows of the trees. I loved Robert so dearly then. His blatant desire for me was the balm I needed to convince me that his love for the Princess Elizabeth was no more than the courtly devotion of an old friend. We journeyed into Norfolk too later that year. Both my father and Lord Warwick were anxious to establish Robert as one of the most influential landowners in the region. He became constable of Castle Rising, which was no great privilege, since the medieval walls were in great decay and overrun with rabbits. We lodged in the new buildings, which were already more than 50 years old, and leaked whenever the wind drove the rain in from the east. Robert spoke of repairing the ruins, but I knew it would not happen. We had so little money, and though Robert was already gathering other estates and offices, I knew that our future lay in London, rather than the flat lands of my birth. Arthur came to see us, however, and was his usual easy company. I had not expected him to like Robert, but they shared a passion for horses, and for riding. Robert recognised Arthur's skill with animals, and respected it. Their friendship made me happy. My mother and my sister Anna also visited one day in August, when the fields baked in the hot sun, clattering over the stone bridge and through the gatehouse to where I waited in the inner bailey. I was poised to apologise for the meanness of receiving them in such a tumble-down ruin, and then I saw Anna's face as she looked up at the soaring towers and stone buttresses. She was completely overawed, and the sensation of triumph I felt was sweet. Her mouth pinched, her brow furrowed, and she greeted me with a kiss that was cold as a noble woman's charity. "Sister," Anna said coolly. Her awe had already changed into resentment. I saw Mother give her a meaningful look, and then Anna smiled at me, although the smile did not reach her eyes. "It is so good to see you again, Amy," she said, and I thought, she wants something from me. We went into the solar, and the servants brought us ale and cold pigeon pie. We spoke of Stansfield and the harvest and our great brood of family. Mother asked after life in London, grasping eagerly for details of the court and the latest gossip. Then I saw her kick Anna under the table. An awkward silence fell, which Anna broke by clearing her throat. "Amy," she said, "out of the love you bear me," which is small, I thought, "I would beg a small favour from you." Anna stopped. Mother was staring at her fixedly. I tried not to appear too impatient. "As you know, my husband, Anthony Huddleston, is not in favour with the king," Anna blurted out. Colour had come into her face now, the red of anger and embarrassment at having to ask for goodwill from the little sister she had once patronised. "It is to our eternal grief that he is overlooked, for he could offer great service to the crown." I did not know Anthony Huddleston well. He had a manor house at Sawston in Cambridgeshire, and before Robert had sued for my hand in marriage, he had seemed a good enough catch for Anna, the modestly dowried stepdaughter of a knight. I wondered if she ever wished I had wed first, so that she could have gone to court and found herself a lord. "Anthony's Catholic sympathies make that impossible," I said coldly. "Surely you understand that. The king is not sympathetic towards papists." Anna cast her eyes down. "Anthony has recanted," she said. "He realises that the path he chose was the wrong one. I have helped him to see." "That Robert's position could gain him preferment," I finished for her, "as it has for our brothers." "Amy," Mother exclaimed, "shame on you for playing out your childhood grudges now. You are not yet too fine a lady to escape my censure." Now it was my turn to blush, with mortification. Mother was right to reprove me, It had been childish of me to take impulsive revenge, and I was ashamed. "I'm sorry," I said reluctantly. "I'll speak to Robert, but I can promise nothing." Anna looked at me with her pale blue eyes. There was something disturbing in their very blankness. I knew then that she had hated asking me for anything, and that having heard my response, she hated me all the more. The air in the solar suddenly felt stiflingly humid, as though her dislike was a palpable thing, smothering me. I stood up abruptly. "Let us walk," I said. "We have no flower gardens here, but the herb beds are pretty at this time of year." Mother was all eagerness, shepherding Anna out ahead of her, chattering about the demands of running a household. There was little I could contribute to the conversation. I'd always intended to take up the reins of household management, but I had servants to organise everything for me now, and whenever I told Robert I felt I should do more, he just laughed indulgently.
"Why would you wish to dirty your hands in the pantry or make tinctures in the stillroom?" he would say. "You are a fine lady now." I might have said that I wished it because I was bored, because I wanted to have a purpose, and to be more than merely Mistress Dudley, but I never did. How could I complain of my lot when so much good fortune was mine? Besides, things would be different when I had a child. "It is good to have you close by, Amy," Mother said, squeezing my hand. She waited for Anna to echo the sentiment, but my sister stopped instead to breathe in the scent of a briar rose growing against the barn wall, and pretended not to hear. Mother sighed. "I hope," she continued, "that we will see you at Stansfield Manor, and perhaps even at Sawston." I doubted that Robert would ever consent to visit Anthony and Anna, and given that she had not invited us, anyway, I thought it wise to give a politician's answer and a polite smile. "Perhaps," I said. "Anna is expecting a child," Mother said, almost desperately. "Perhaps you will stand sponsor to it." My eyes met Anna's in a moment of surprising unity. Both of us deplored Mother's attempts to make us like each other more than we were able. At a distance, it was entirely possible. We wrote politely to one another, but had no desire to be more intimate. Thus it was sometimes with siblings. I loved Arthur, but I could not love Anna. "I congratulate you," I said to my sister, suppressing a stab of envy. Robert and I had been wed a year now, and I had not yet conceived. Anna cast down her gaze. "It is early days yet. I pray this one will go full term." Amen to that. On such a subject, we could be in easy agreement, knowing how infinitely dangerous and difficult such matters could be. "You should not ride back," I said impulsively. "It cannot be good for you. Take our carriage." Mother looked gratified, but Anna shook her head. "The roads are too bad," she said. "I'd rather ride." I was still feeling affronted that night as Robert and I lay in bed together. I told him of the visit and complained how little Anna liked me. "Darling Amy,"
Robert said, pulling the neck of my nightgown down, kissing my bare shoulder.
"How could anyone dislike you? Your sister is but sour and ugly and envious. Pay no heed."
I giggled. "Robert," I said, playfully pushing away his hands to encourage him all the more. "Anna is with child. Now for that I do envy her." Robert laughed.
"There's an easy remedy for that, sweetheart,"
he said. He rolled me beneath him.
"We try."
His lips brushed my ear, then moved down the line of my throat.
"And if at first we do not succeed, we keep trying. How does that suit you?"
"It suits me well," I admitted. Robert's hands were moving over my body now, and my skin was damp, and my heart was pounding with the pleasure of it. I forgot everything. I forgot about Anna, I forgot to ask for the favour for Anthony Huddleston. I never thought on it again. Chapter 9. Lizzie, present day. Lizzie worked herself hard in rehearsal that day. Partly it was to distract herself from thinking about Johnny Robsart and Arthur. She still couldn't get hold of Dudley and felt as though she was letting him down. But what could she do if he didn't answer his phone? She could hardly go around to his flat, not without sparking a whole load more speculation. But the anxiety gnawed away at her, so she focused it all into the practice. Even Alessandro, her professional dance partner, who was a perfectionist, brought her a bottle of water and an energy bar after she had spent 9 hours and skipped lunch to practice her steps for the jive.
"Take some rest, Lizzie," he said. "Go home."
He smiled at her. Alessandro was ridiculously handsome, almost stereotypically so, with his dark puppy eyes and curling lashes. Whenever he smouldered at her during their live performances, Lizzie wanted to burst out laughing.
"It won't make any difference how much you practice," he said. "You dance like an angel, but—"
He gave an expressive shrug.
"But they will vote us off anyway when they get the chance."
"I know," Lizzie said. She snapped the top off the water bottle and took a deep gulp. "I want to do my very best, all the same," she said fiercely. "I want to show everyone what a farce it is." To her horror, her eyes filled with hot tears. "I'm so sorry, Al," she said. "We were good. We could have won. And now it will all go wrong. It's so unfair." Alessandro gave another very expressive shrug.
"It's life, Lizzie. It's show business. You know that."
"It's still wrong," Lizzie said. "It's not your fault, is it?" Alessandro had been one of the professionals on Stars for 4 years now, and had never been in the final. This time she knew he had thought he had won the jackpot, and it was going to be snatched away from him because of her.
"I'm not sure it's your fault either," Alessandro said. "People say you broke up Dudley's marriage and caused his wife to kill herself."
He made a scornful sound.
"This is rubbish. He did that all by himself."
He wrapped her in a very muscular hug. He smelled outrageously of a mixture of citrus and jasmine, and something Lizzie thought was black pepper. She tried not to sneeze. It was very comforting, though. She snuggled closer. "Thanks, Al," she said. "I really need a friend at the moment."
"Hey,"
Alessandro released her gently and kissed her on both cheeks.
"You've got plenty of friends. Come around for supper with Christy and me sometime soon. I will cook you proper spaghetti."
"I'd like that," Lizzie said, "as long as Christy doesn't think I'm trying to break you up. I do seem to have a reputation as a homewrecker at the moment." Alessandro rolled his eyes exaggeratedly.
"Listen to me, Lizzie. Dudley and Amelia got married too young. They were infatuated with each other, and when that went—"
He snapped his fingers.
"There was nothing left. You are not to blame. You are just friends, no?"
"Yes." Lizzie's head ached suddenly, and she rubbed a hand across her eyes. "We've been friends since we were kids," she said. "But no one seems to get that. They treat it as though it's weird." Alessandro smiled.
"It's tricky, you know. The two of you seem very close. People are either going to think that you're secretly having an affair or, how do you say it? You're kind of dependent on each other, and it's a bit childish and inappropriate."
Lizzie pulled a face at him. "Thanks," she said. It was hurtful to have an outsider's view of her friendship with Dudley spelled out in those terms, even though that was only what Cat and Bill had been trying to tell her, in their different ways. Move on, grow up, get yourself a boyfriend. It wasn't that she hadn't had relationships. She'd gone out with one of her co-presenters on Saturday Survival School for 6 months.
but somehow he hadn't been as much fun to hang out with as Dudley was. And there had been a fling with a backing singer she had met on tour, and a few other dates that hadn't amounted to much. But she worked too hard to bother with casual relationships, and spent too much time away for serious ones. And anyway, why would she want to when she was the poster child for dysfunctional families? She knew that her parents' marriage had been a disaster area. She had stored away the fragments of memory, the tactless comments people had sometimes made, and most of all, the vicious headlines from the newspapers. Harry Kingdom had been fodder for gossip and scandal long before the internet age. It was not the sort of thing Lizzie wanted to read, and it had left her with the fierce belief that it was easier, safer, to be self-reliant and keep away from complications. Alessandro shrugged.
It's true. You and Dudley, you want different things. It's not a good combination, and it means you are bad for each other.
He looked away, as though weighing whether or not to say anything else. Then he sighed.
Dudley does care for you, I think. It's sweet, but he also wants to use you. You're more successful than he is, on the way up.
He shrugged again.
You know how ambitious Dudley is. Whereas you...
He took her by the shoulders, his gaze searching her face.
I'm not sure what you want from him, Lizzie, he said slowly. You care for him too. I realize that, and you're very loyal to him. But you're too good for him. He doesn't deserve you.
His hands fell to his side.
Cazzo, this is none of my business. I should just shut up.
Lizzie's lips twitched. I'm not sure what cazzo means, Al, but I get the general gist. She gave him a quick kiss on the cheek. Thank you. I know you mean well. You're such a good friend. Alessandro shook his head, said something else in Italian that she didn't understand, and wandered off to pick up his bag, giving her a casual wave as he went out. Lizzie felt bad, as though she had trivialized his kindness to her.
Lizzie.
Kat, as ever, was at her elbow.
The car's waiting.
Thank you, Kat. Lizzie tried to shake off her dark mood, but she could feel it dogging her steps as she went outside. So many people disliked Dudley. They didn't understand. It felt as though her friendship with him was always under siege. She knew that Dudley had ruffled some feathers in the carving out of his career, but so had most people. It was part of the business. There were journalists he had insulted, and paparazzi whose cameras he had broken. There was a long line of bar and hotel staff across London and the world who had had to clear up after his excesses. He could be short-tempered and impatient to the point of rudeness. He made fun of people he didn't like, and because he was clever, he could also be cruel. It was no wonder that some parts of the media were taking this opportunity to crucify him. She didn't like it, but she could understand it. She wasn't blind to Dudley's faults. She knew he could be selfish and self-seeking. In a tiny corner of her heart, she was almost prepared to admit that perhaps Bill and Alessandro were right, and Dudley did use their friendship for his own advancement. She stared unseeingly at the London landmarks as they sped past. To her, Dudley was also the boy of 8, who had been the first, the only person to speak to Lizzie when she had arrived, grief-stricken and alone, at her new school. Her mother had died. She had hated the world, and been horribly rude and prickly. But somehow, Dudley had understood that, and had tolerated her. He had helped her with her homework until she caught up with the rest of the class, and then she helped him, because she was as clever, if not cleverer, than he was. He was interested in mathematics. Lizzie had preferred languages. They had been friends ever since. How long ago it all seemed now. She remembered how she had felt when Dudley had met Amelia. They had had a whirlwind romance, and married, and Lizzie had been riven with jealousy, and fear to start with. Fear that she would lose one of the few lasting relationships of her life. But, as it had turned out, nothing had really changed. Dudley still hung out with her. They still talked about anything and everything. Soon Amelia had moved to Oakhanger Hall, whilst Dudley lived most of the time in London. It had felt almost as though Amelia did not exist. Lizzie shifted uncomfortably on the seat. The feelings she had for Dudley were deep-rooted and important to her, but they were completely devoid of sexual desire. Not once in their long, intimate friendship had she felt the same shock of connection she had experienced that morning with Arthur Robsart. She had never felt such awareness, such a sense of recognition with anyone else. In fact, now she thought about it, she had seldom been strongly attracted to anyone. It wasn't just the wariness engendered by her childhood. It had been lack of interest, almost to the point where she had wondered if there was something wrong with her. And then she had touched Arthur, and the world had exploded into sensation. I know you. It was stupid. It was mad. In some way, it had to be connected with her gift of psychometry, but she had no idea how. Yet it felt as though there was an affinity, an instinct as old as time, that drew them together. Lizzie felt the goosebumps rise over her skin. She did not want that connection to Arthur, and she was certain he didn't want it either. She curled her fingers over the scar on her palm and squeezed tightly, as though she could eradicate it. She told herself it didn't matter anyway. Very probably, she wouldn't see Arthur again. It was hardly likely she'd be invited to Amelia's funeral, and even if she did see him, she'd make sure never, ever to touch him. She felt restless. Thoughts of Dudley, Johnny, and Arthur turning over and over in her mind. As soon as she got home, she went down to the swimming pool in the basement. To her relief, it was empty. It lay flat and turquoise blue as a summer sky, the underwater lights throwing ripples and shadows upward to reflect against the white arch of the roof. There was a strong smell of chlorine and the hum of machinery, and beyond the huge glass windows, the River Thames ran dark grey. Another world. Lizzie swam lengths for as long as she had the energy, counting her strokes, feeling the resistance as she carved through the water, emptying her mind of thought and focusing only on sensation, sound, light, and touch. She was exhausted when she climbed out, but, infuriatingly, as soon as she stepped from the water, the thoughts she had kept at bay for the past hour and a half rushed back, clamouring for space and attention. She wondered what Johnny had wanted to talk to her about. She wished he had had the chance to speak to her, wished she had insisted on it. Remembering the solemn child she had met at the wedding, and seeing him as this damaged teenager was deeply painful. His situation resonated deeply with her. She wanted to help him, and was furious with herself for standing back. Not getting involved, avoiding emotional engagement of any sort, had become something of a habit with her. She wondered whether that was why she relied so heavily on the people she had known right from the start, because she was afraid to make new connections. She sent out for sushi and tempura scallops, and settled on the balcony in her bathrobe, her laptop on her knee, watching dusk sink over the river. Once the food had arrived, she put the boxes on the wooden table next to her, dipping into her favourite albacore truffle ponzu, while she typed Amelia Lester's name into the search box. She forced herself to scroll past all the recent lurid stuff about Amelia's death, and the headlines from that morning describing her showdown with Johnny. It seemed like an age ago. Out of sheer curiosity, she clicked on the Wikipedia entry that gave Amelia's family background,
and found that it was almost as dysfunctional as her own. Half and step relations littered the page. It seemed that Arthur Robsart was the eldest, the son of Amelia's father Terry and a supermodel called Layla El Ansari, who originally came from Dubai but now lived in America. Terry Robsart had been a fashion photographer in the 80s, and his affair with Layla had been as tempestuous as it was short. He had cheated on her with another model, Jessica Scott, whom he had gone on to marry. This second relationship had produced Amelia, Anna, and Johnny before Terry was caught in flagrante again and Jessica walked out on him. After their divorce, Jessica had married an academic called Sam Appleyard, who worked for the British Antarctic Survey. Lizzie scrolled through various images of the family. Terry Robsart looked startlingly like her own father. Not in looks, but in the fleshy, bon viveur style of a man who had enjoyed the finer things in life and taken them to excess. He had been a very well-known and successful photographer until he'd drunk himself into an early grave. Jessica, Amelia's mother, had also died relatively young, from cancer, a few years ago. Lizzie grimaced. Johnny could only have been about 14 at the time, and his siblings not much older. Their mother's death must have devastated their lives, and now they had lost Amelia too. She pushed the hair back from her face with hands that shook a little. What utter crap people had to deal with sometimes. A buzzing on the entry phone disturbed her. She didn't really want to see anyone this evening. She was bone tired and wanted to sleep.
Lizzie.
It was Dudley's voice.
Let me in.
Lizzie's heart leaped with a mixture of relief and anxiety. She'd kept trying to ring Dudley and had sent him loads of texts, but he hadn't replied to any of them. She jumped up, pressing the button to let him in, and rushing across the flat to the door. She grabbed him as soon as he came in, wrapping her arms about him, holding him close. He felt warm and reassuring, and smelled of his citrus cologne, and she almost cried at the familiarity of it.
Dudley,
she said, muffled against his shirt.
Thank God. Oh, I'm so glad to see you.
She hugged him tighter.
I'm so very sorry about everything.
It took her a moment to realise that Dudley wasn't returning the hug. He stood limp within her grasp, and when she drew back to scan his face, he looked down at her with an expression she recognised from childhood. Lizzie's heart sank. Dudley was sulking. Next would be the recriminations. Dudley pulled away and strode across the room with restless energy to throw himself into one of the low armchairs by the window. His fair, open face was marred by a ferocious scowl.
What the fuck?
He said, running a hand through the hair that flopped over his brow.
Where have you been when I needed you?
That's not fair. Lizzie felt awful, hot, guilty, and miserable. I've been working all day today. It's not as though I didn't get in touch. I tried ringing, but you were always engaged or your phone was switched off. I texted you as soon as I could, and I've lost count of the messages I've sent you since. I've been worried sick about you. Dudley stared at her, his dark eyes full of bafflement and anger.
Why didn't you come to find me?
He asked.
Oh, wait. I totally get it. You're cutting me loose like everyone else. I'm toxic now. My career's over.
What are you talking about? Lizzie stared at him. She'd expected Dudley to be devastated. She'd imagined that he must be experiencing a whole cocktail of complex emotions about Amelia's death and the police investigation. But she hadn't expected his prime concern to be his career.
Bill told my agent today that they've offered the co-host role on Musical World to Damon Wood,
Dudley said. He sat forward, his gaze accusing.
I thought you and I were doing that show together.
Lizzie spread her hands wide.
I don't know anything about it.
She shook her head. I'm sorry. That was really insensitive of Bill to do that now. Dudley interrupted her.
Don't give me that bullshit, he said. Bill doesn't breathe without your permission. Of course he would have told you.
He stood up and strode across the room as though he couldn't keep still. Lizzie could feel the air crackling with his anger and frustration.
Have you any idea how crap all this is for me? He burst out. Dinah practically forced me to withdraw from Stars of the Dance, even though I didn't see why I should. Now, I've lost this show too, and another 3 jobs I thought were in the bag. Everything's falling apart around me, and you don't give a shit.
That's not true, Lizzie said, trying to hold on to her temper. Of course I care, but you know what this business is like, Dudley. It can be brutal. You just need to give everything time to settle down. It's hardly surprising people are jittery. You've just lost your wife, and there are a lot of rumours going around. She thought of Johnny and his vivid despair, and the contrast with Dudley and his self-pitying interviews online and in the news. She rubbed her forehead. She wanted to tell him that he needed to show some humility and preferably some genuine grief if he wanted to get people on his side. But she knew that would only make him angrier.
That stupid cow, Dudley said, with a savagery that shocked her. I swear, she did this on purpose to ruin everything for me. The police have interviewed me twice now, and the press are crucifying me, and it's all her fault. Dudley, Lizzie shook her head. I know you're upset that Amelia's dead. I don't give a shit about Amelia, Dudley said with brutal frankness. She was like a fucking leech, living off my money and my name. We were separated. I told her I wanted a divorce, so why does everyone expect me to be sorry she's dead? He looked genuinely baffled. Lizzie took a deep breath. I think you must be very upset to be talking like this, Duds, she said carefully. You know you can say anything to me, and I'll never repeat it, but... She went over to him and took his hands in hers. Even if you didn't love Amelia anymore, it's still a tragedy that she died so horribly. People will expect you at least to express sincere regret over that. Dudley shook off her touch. All I know is I'm losing everything, he said. Everything. And you're just like everyone else. You won't help me. He threw himself back down on the sofa and looked at her with dark, pleading eyes. Please, Lizzie, help me. I am trying to help you. Lizzie sat down beside him. I'm always there for you if you need to talk, Dudley, but... She hesitated. She didn't want to be too harsh, in case she sent Dudley spinning off into another rant. He had always been mercurial, but his self-absorption was truly shocking. Sorry. Dudley dropped his head into his hands. When he looked up, Lizzie saw tears in his eyes. I'm so sorry, Lizzie. I didn't mean it. I'm not myself. That little shit, Johnny Robsart, came looking for me last night, making threats, saying all kinds of things. I had to report him to the police. This whole business has been awful for me. Wait. Lizzie raised a hand to stem the flow of words. You reported Amelia's little brother to the police. He was off his head, Dudley said plaintively. He accused me of wanting her dead, of pushing her down the stairs. I thought he might be dangerous, so I called the police. He's 17 years old, Dudley, Lizzie said furiously, and his sister's just died. Couldn't you have been a bit more sensitive? Dudley shrugged. They should lock him in the loony bin, he said. Best place for him. He's such an emo kid, totally out of it. He's always been like that, ever since I've known him. Always talking weird stuff and appearing and disappearing like a ghost. I remember once, at Oakhanger, he and Amelia were playing some trick where he vanished like it was magic. So childish, but they thought it was funny. She was as bad as he was. He caught Lizzie's eye and spread his hands wide in a gesture of innocence.
What are you looking at me like that for? If they section him, he'll get help there, won't he?
Lizzie shook her head and turned away. She felt so tired. Tired of Dudley's volatility and self-obsession. Tired, in an odd way, that she had stuck by him, because she had known all along that he could be shallow, but she had hoped he was better than this. She had believed he was. This self-pity had to be a reaction to grief.
Dudley, she said, go home. Go to sleep. This isn't you talking. You need to calm down. Give yourself time to grieve.
I'm not sitting at home on my own, Dudley said.
It's the pits. Come out with me, Lizzie.
With the mercurial suddenness of which he was capable, Dudley was smiling, exuding charm again. He leaped up to grab her hands and pulled her towards the door.
Let's go to a club. Somewhere private. Quiet. Hell, I could do with drowning my sorrows.
He looked hopeful, boyish. Lizzie hung back.
Duds, is that really a good idea? Amelia only died 2 days ago. Like it or not, you're under police investigation. You can't...
She stopped, seeing the frown descend on his brow again.
People would find out, she said, even if we went somewhere quiet. And if I came with you, there would be even more talk. Like I give a shit,
Dudley said. He tugged on her hands again. He'd stopped smiling.
They're going to have to get used to it, aren't they? We can be together now.
It took Lizzie a moment to realise what he meant, and when she did, she felt as though she had stepped off a cliff edge into the dark. What? No. She freed herself from Dudley's grip, taking such a hurried step back that she almost tripped over the table leg. We're friends, Dudley, nothing more. I mean... Shock and panic raced through her. We've been friends forever, and it's great, but I don't want... She gulped.
Surely you knew. I mean, I thought you felt the same.
She stopped. Dudley was wearing what she privately thought of as his winsome look, the one that told interviewers and fans that he knew he was irresistible, but he was going to pretend to be modest about it.
It's okay, Lizzie, he said. I understand. I know it's too soon. I guess I've had time to think about it because Amelia and I were divorcing. But I guess you'd prefer to wait a while before we get together.
Lizzie threw up her hands.
No, she said. Stop.
She looked at him, saw the self-satisfaction on his face, and realised afresh what she already knew. No one had ever turned Dudley Lester down. He simply could not believe it would happen.
I thought that what we had was different, she said slowly. We're childhood friends, Duds. I think of you like a brother, like you're my best friend, and that's special, but it's not. She struggled. It's not romantic. It was never like that. It was better than that. To change it would spoil everything.
She rubbed a hand across her forehead.
Oh God, I'm doing this all wrong. I know I am. I really like you, Dudley. You're incredibly important to me, but...
Dudley's face had darkened as she was speaking. She knew she was making a terrible mess of everything.
She'd never expected to be in this situation with Dudley, of all people. She thought they understood each other. She felt disoriented and shocked to have got it so wrong. This isn't the time to talk about it, she said quickly. It's late, and I've got to work tomorrow. I'm doing an orienteering event with kids from St. Giles School. I need an early night.
Orienteering?
Dudley looked at her, brows arched.
Because you're, really interested in the outdoors?
It's a charity thing for life changers, Lizzie said defensively. I'm an ambassador for them.
Yeah, that figures, Dudley said. Because you're a perpetual child yourself.
He grabbed his jacket from the back of the chair. I'm going to Mackenzie's. Perhaps I'll see you around. If not,
he shrugged. The door slammed behind him. Shit. Lizzie resisted the urge to call him back, or grab a quick change of outfit and head out after him. It was habit, ingrained in her to look out for him. Even now, when she was reeling at how badly she had misread their relationship, she was still taking responsibility for him. She scrubbed her hands through her hair in exasperation. She knew exactly what would happen if she did go after him. Dudley would be thrilled to see her, as though their quarrel had never happened. Perhaps he'd interpret it as her changing her mind, succumbing to his irresistible charm. She pulled a face. On the other hand, if she didn't go, he would get drunk and get himself into deeper trouble, generate more headlines, probably end up in jail. Lizzie walked through to her bedroom. The flat, so spacious and open in design, suddenly seemed claustrophobic, almost like a prison. She needed to get away. She was gripped by something almost like desperation. She needed to make a break from Dudley, and from the life that he represented. The shallow, high-profile, celebrity-driven world that she'd inhabited for as long as she could remember. She had no idea where she could go, though, or what she might do. It was a terrifying thought, as though she wanted to throw away the compass of her life and start over, and she wasn't sure she was brave enough to do that. For a moment, she was tempted to reach for the concert program, as she had done that morning, and conjure up memories of her mother to soothe and comfort her. But that felt wrong, as though she were overusing the gift. Instead, she lay down on the bed, listening to the traffic and the sirens, and thinking about Dudley reporting Johnny to the police for harassment. It must have been directly after that Johnny had come looking for her. No wonder Arthur had been so protective of his little brother. He must have been afraid she would complain too, and that they would take Johnny away. With a muttered curse, she sat up again. She needed to find Dudley and try and talk some sense into him before he did something even more stupid or hurtful. She threw on some clothes, took the first jacket that was hanging in the closet, picked up her bag, checked her purse and keys, and went out. Down in the foyer, Jason looked up from the desk with a frown between his brows. "I'm going out," Lizzie said, then felt annoyed with herself. Since when had she had to explain herself to everyone? Was that another habit she had somehow got into, accounting to Bill and Kat and everyone else for her life? Ostensibly the one in control, definitely the one earning the money, and yet dancing to their tune. "You're a perpetual child." She knew that Dudley's words had been intended to sting, because she had rejected him and wounded his pride. She wondered if he really cared for her, or whether his suggestion that they should be together was just another way for him to use her. Suddenly, nothing seemed certain anymore. When had her judgment become so faulty? The taxi dropped her directly outside the discreet members' entrance of Mackenzie's bar, and a doorman came forward to meet her. It was raining now, the London lights reflected in streaky patterns on the wet roads and pavements. Music pulsed from the building. As she ducked under the proffered umbrella and reached the slightly damp red carpet, she saw Arthur Robsart was in the doorway. Great. His massive disapproval was all she needed to make the evening even worse. "I'd be grateful if you could let me in," he was saying. "It's an emergency. I need to find my brother-in-law urgently." Arthur was looking for Dudley. Lizzie felt a trickle of anxiety down her back. Dudley had said that he'd reported Johnny to the police only the day before. She couldn't imagine that Arthur would be looking for him to thank him. She realised there was a way to find out. She touched Arthur's arm very lightly. This time, she was braced for the shock. But she wasn't sure Arthur was. He spun around as though he'd been burned.
I'm sorry, sir. The doorman was deferential, even when he was refusing entry. Members only. He's with me, Lizzie said. She steered Arthur inside, and after a second, felt the rigid tension in his arm relax a little. The door closed behind them, cocooning them in the warm opulence of the hall. Arthur leaned close to her. His breath stirred the tendrils of her hair against her cheek. You've got to stop doing that, he said. I was trying to help, Lizzie said. You said it was an emergency. Arthur's gaze searched her face. It was odd. When she wasn't touching him, she couldn't read his thoughts at all. He had inscrutability down to a fine art. The contrast between the intimacy of reading him and the true distance between them was deeply disconcerting. What did you see? Arthur said. What did you see when you touched me? Lizzie couldn't read his tone either, but his words alone made her shiver. There's no point pretending it doesn't happen, Arthur said when she didn't immediately reply. We both know it does. Okay, Lizzie said. She cleared her throat. It's just so weird. Granted, Arthur said dryly. Perhaps we can have a chat about it sometime. For now, though, what did you see? Lizzie paused for a moment, analysing the emotions she had sensed in him, and trying to form them into words. You're looking for Johnny, she said. He's disappeared. You think he might be trying to find Dudley. You're afraid for him. She could feel that fear, visceral and raw. Arthur knew exactly how vulnerable and alone his brother was feeling, and he wanted desperately to protect him. Lizzie understood that urgency and envied the closeness of the bond that had produced it. You're hoping Dudley might know where he is, she added. That's why you're here. Arthur nodded slowly. Spot on, he said. That really is uncanny. A waiter brushed past them, looking curiously at the two of them. Come on, Lizzie said. Dudley's probably in the VIP bar downstairs. It's where he tends to hang out, though I doubt he'll be of much help, she added, remembering what Dudley had said about Johnny earlier. He and Johnny don't exactly get on, do they? I've checked everywhere else I can think of, Arthur said grimly. And again, Lizzie felt the razor-sharp edge of anxiety beneath his words. Dudley's my last hope. Not that I expected to have to accost him in a club. Not 2 days after Amelia died. Once again, Lizzie could sense the anger and disgust in him, held under tight control. I had to search the celebrity gossip online to find out where he was likely to be. Can you believe that? He broke off. Yes. Of course you can. He shook his head sharply. You probably came here to spend the evening with him. Less of the judging, please, Lizzie said. I'm helping you, remember? She didn't even bother trying to explain to Arthur why she was looking for Dudley herself. Let's hope he knows something, she said, and that you won't end up punching him. She saw Arthur smile. I have more self-control than that. And certainly more than Dudley has. Lizzie didn't doubt it. You really don't like Dudley, do you? She said. By which, I mean, you hate him. The power of the antagonism she sensed in him shocked her. She knew Dudley would hardly be Arthur's favourite person, but it felt as though there was something very dark and complicated here. Arthur raised his brows. You don't need to be a mind reader to know that, he said curtly. They went down the white staircase, past the twirling statue of a mermaid on a unicorn, into the aquatic-themed cellar bar. A few people nodded and called out a greeting to Lizzie. People were looking at Arthur as they passed, probably because he was so good-looking, but also, Lizzie suspected, because they were wondering where they had seen him before. Most of them wouldn't remember.
The world of celebrity had a high turnover. The bar was only half full, and a quick check proved that Dudley wasn't there. Lizzie followed the insistent thud of the beat towards the dance floor, but couldn't see him there either.
"The guy behind the bar says Dudley hasn't been in tonight,"
Arthur said, joining her, his gaze fixed on the swaying dancers. His shoulder brushed Lizzie's. She felt acutely aware of him, and wasn't sure whether it was the intimate darkness or the pulse of the music that was influencing her. "I'm sorry," she said as they made their way back through the bar. "It was a long shot."
"Dudley told you he'd be here, though,"
Arthur said, and it wasn't a question.
"You expected to find him."
Lizzie stopped. They looked at one another.
"Okay,"
she said after a moment. "Evidently I'm not the only one who can read minds." She thought Arthur almost smiled.
"It was an educated guess," he said. "No more. I don't share your gift."
"All right," Lizzie said, sighing. "I didn't want to tell you because I thought you'd make another of your judgmental comments, that's all. Dudley was round at my flat earlier, and he mentioned he was coming on here. I guess he changed his mind. I didn't come here to party with him," she added, hating that she was explaining herself. I thought he wasn't doing himself any favours by being so crassly insensitive at a time like this, and I wanted to try and persuade him to go home."
"That's hardly your responsibility,"
Arthur said, holding the door open for her as they exited the bar and started back up the stairs.
"No,"
Lizzie admitted.
"I'm looking out for Johnny because he's my brother. He's 17, and I've looked out for him all my life,"
Arthur said.
"Whereas you and Dudley—"
"There is no me and Dudley," Lizzie snapped. "I was trying to be a friend. That's all." Arthur was silent.
"Look,"
Lizzie said as they reached the top of the steps and were standing once again under the huge central chandelier in the hall. She fumbled for her phone, pulling it out of her pocket. "I know this is important, so I'll give Dudley a call." Arthur's hand closed over hers on the phone.
"Why?"
he said.
"Why would you care?"
"God, you make things difficult," Lizzie said. She stared up defiantly into his eyes. "I care about Johnny because it's clear he's desperately unhappy," she said. "And I understand how horrible it feels to lose someone close to you, especially when you're so young and you've already gone through so much." She stopped dead, aware that she was revealing far too much about herself to someone who was practically a stranger, and an unsympathetic one at that. Arthur let go of her hand. Still holding his gaze very deliberately, Lizzie flipped open the phone and dialed Dudley's number. There was no reply. "He's probably blocking me," she said, after she'd let it ring 20 times. "Dudley and I aren't exactly on good terms at the moment." She shrugged, sliding the phone back into her pocket. Dudley's tantrums were only an irritant compared to what Johnny might do in the extremity of his misery. "I'm sorry I couldn't help," she added. "I don't really know what else to suggest."
"Thank you anyway,"
Arthur said. He looked suddenly tired. Lizzie had to repress the urge to reach out and offer comfort. Hell, she was in a mess.
"Would you let me know when you find Johnny?"
she asked, a little awkwardly.
"I'd like to know he's safe." "Yes, of course,"
Arthur said quietly. They stood for a moment longer in silence, whilst the distant thud of the music made the floor vibrate, and nearer at hand a drunken couple fell out of a doorway amidst shrieks of laughter. "Time to go," Lizzie said. They went out into the London night. The rain had grown heavier, streaking the pavements and reflecting the streetlights in flat black puddles. It was almost 2 o'clock.
"Can I give you a lift?"
Arthur asked.
"That's okay, thanks.
Lizzie smiled at him, feeling less vulnerable now they were saying goodbye. The doorman will call a taxi for me. Anyway, I imagine you're keen to head off and look for Johnny, so... Arthur didn't move.
One day soon, he said, we'll need to talk about this gift of yours, and what it means for us.
We could just ignore it, Lizzie said lightly.
I doubt very much that will happen, Arthur said.
He raised a hand, and she thought that for a fleeting moment he brushed the raindrops from her cheek. But perhaps she had imagined that.
Good night, Lizzie Kingdom, he said.
Lizzie watched him walk away, disregarding the water that was now running in rivulets down her neck. He didn't turn to look back at her. The most disturbing thing was that when he vanished from sight down a side street, she felt bereft. The ringing of her phone was a welcome distraction.
Lizzie!
It was Dudley. He sounded as though he was crying again. There was noise in the background, the chink of glasses, and a roar of voices. Not Mackenzie's then, but another nightclub somewhere nearby.
Lizzie, help me,
Dudley said.
I can't do this without you. I need you.
Where are you? Lizzie said. She looked along the empty street. Arthur had gone. Nor, she realised, did she have his number. Dudley, she said again, where are you? Her first thought, her only thought, was to find him so she could ask him about Johnny.
I'm at the Lizard Lounge, Dudley said. I need you to come and get me. Please, Lizzie.
His voice broke. All right, Lizzie said. I'm on my way. Chapter 10. Amy, Whitehall Palace, summer 1552. Robert was insanely ambitious. I had always known it, but never was it more apparent than in those summer days of 1552. The serious boy king had been ill that spring. He was a sickly youth, whose permanently pallid air gave the impression that all life and vitality had long since drained from him, and he was no more than a husk. He spent all his time at his books and writing his letters, but it scarcely mattered. My father-in-law was the Duke of Northumberland now, and he ruled the kingdom. The Duke of Somerset had been executed for treason, and the Dudleys had climbed so high it felt as though we were touching the stars. That day there was to be a joust, one in a long procession of masks and tourneys I remember that year. The flower-bedecked pavilions, the ladies fluttering and gossiping, the press of the spectators, the blaze of heraldry, the stir of trumpets. I hated every last moment of it. Robert and his brothers were like so many flaunting peacocks amongst the crowd, and I was supposed to smile until my face ached and applaud until my palms were sore. "How fine your husband looks!" Lady Margaret Palmer gave me a sideways glance and an arch little smile. "All the women are hot for him." She leaned further out over the balcony, crushing the sweet-smelling roses that garlanded the stands in attempt to catch Robert's eye. In contrast, I tried to draw back a little. I hated the dust and the heat and the blood of the tourney. My head was already aching, and I put up a hand to rub my brow. "Amy?" My sharp-eyed mother-in-law had noticed my withdrawal. She was a kind woman, the Duchess, in a brisk manner that still intimidated me after 2 years of marriage. Weakness was not something that she either understood or tolerated. Generous to me though she was, I knew that she, along with the rest, had thought Robert should look higher for a bride.
It was a long time since his love for me had seemed sufficient to protect me from those slights, either real or imagined. Now our desire seemed an ephemeral thing. It was no longer so heady as in the early days of our marriage, and it was all too quickly satisfied. Often, it left nothing but emptiness between us in its wake. I needed a child. Without one, I was nothing, less than a wife. The knowledge that a son would transform my status was becoming an obsession with me. Anna had lost her babe the previous year, and yet still, ashamed as I was of it, I envied her. I had not even conceived yet.
"Do you feel the heat?" Her Grace inquired. "Is it the sun?"
She drew me beneath one of the fluttering canopies.
"Sit, my dear. Take some rest."
Her gaze flickered to my stomach.
"You look very pale. I wonder, do you think you may be with child?"
She looked at me with her kind, hopeful eyes. I could have told her no. I should have done. I was hot and sick because my flux was coming, as regularly as it always did. But I was tired of disappointing them, of the monthly letters to my mother that were full of inconsequential chatter, and no news of a babe. Pain gripped me, and a desire to be of consequence for once. It was pleasant to be approved of, to be ushered to a seat in the shade, to sit quietly whilst the Duchess sent a servant scurrying for a glass of wine to revive me. I lowered my gaze and pretended that I did not see the glances of surprise and hear the whispers that had already started.
"Can it be true? Amy Dudley is enceinte?"
Then a voice, quickly hushed.
"I thought she was barren."
Ah, my sister-in-law, Anne Seymour, so loud and tactless, articulating what everyone else was thinking. Anne had grown sourer still with the death of her father, and I suppose that was no surprise, for who would wish to be trapped in a marriage to the son of their father's murderer? It was a harsh world we inhabited, for all that it was dressed up in silks and gaudy colours. I swallowed the bitterness of Anne's words. She had no children herself, so perhaps, like me, she was driven by envy. Yet how little time it had taken the whole court to condemn me, because I had failed to perform a woman's natural function, a woman's only important function, and fall pregnant. Robert, even now demonstrating his virility in the lists, was surely as fecund as the stallion he was riding. Thus ran the logic. If there was no child, then it must be my fault. Even as I rested my hands demurely over my stomach, I knew this could only end in more disappointment, more disapproval. Yet still, I said nothing, sitting in the dusty June heat, dreaming, as though that would make it true. It was not long, of course, before everyone knew there could be no child. The year slid into autumn, and then into winter, and I did not increase. I felt a curious sense of disappointment and loss, as though I had almost convinced myself of the lie along with everyone else. I grieved for the child I was not carrying, and the canker of doubt, of a belief in my barrenness, burrowed a little deeper into my heart. Nobody mentioned that there was no babe. Indeed, I think perhaps that Robert barely noted it. He was too occupied with other matters, not that he ever discussed them with me. I had tried to talk to Robert about affairs of state, of the court business, of politics when he attended the Parliament, but he had no interest in my opinions. I quickly came to realise that he humoured me. He never sought my advice, perhaps because he was so certain of his own mind. Robert
was now a gentleman of the King's Privy Chamber, and his father had granted him more estates in Norfolk. This made me happy, though less so when I discovered we were not to go there. I missed the landscape of my childhood, and I missed Arthur very much too. But Robert shook his head when I bearded him in his study and begged to go home again.
"It is more important to be at court now than buried away in the country," he said. "All the things that matter happen here."
"Then what are our manors for?" I felt frustrated, "if not to be lived in?"
Robert laughed,
though I glimpsed irritation in his eyes.
"You are such an innocent, Amy," he said. "Owning land is always about power and money."
I could see that, but to me it was also about building a home, a place to raise the family I was still so hopeful we would have. It was about belonging. I was only just starting to learn that I needed to have a settled home, now that I felt so rootless.
"My father wishes to increase his authority in Norfolk," Robert said. "Suffolk, too. They are unruly places, dangerous to the stability of the realm. So he grants me land and authority there to keep that danger in check."
I was not so naive that I did not know what he meant. There were festering resentments in the east of the country. People did not like the imposition of the new religion and held fast to older loyalties. There was always the possibility of insurrection.
"Was that why you married me?" I asked suddenly. "To buy my father's loyalty and increase your influence?"
I wished the words unsaid as soon as they were out of my mouth. I knew Robert well enough by now to know that he admired independence of spirit and could not bear what he saw as a mawkish need for reassurance. Even so, if he had denied it immediately, all might have been well. If he had kissed me and told me fondly that I was foolish to doubt him, I would have pushed those fears back into the dark recesses of my mind. He did neither. He stood, gazing out of the window for a moment, and he seemed lost in thought, as though he had not heard me. Then,
"Your father's loyalty was never in doubt," he said.
He went back to his desk, picked up his pen, and resumed the writing I had interrupted. I felt hot and furious. I clenched my fists by my side. "I shall go alone then," I said. "My mother would welcome a visit, I know. She has been ailing of late."
"A wife's place is with her husband," Robert said, without looking up this time. "You will stay here at court with me."
"But I have nothing to do," I burst out. "I cannot be forever at my needlework or reading." The quill snapped between Robert's fingers.
"Why are you troubling me with this, Amy?" he said. "Surely after 3 years you can find your own amusement. Go and visit your aunt in Camberwell or—"
I did not hear what other suggestions he might have for my entertainment, for I had left the room. I did not wish to be amused. I wanted to have something to do. Later, though, when we supped at court with the King and the Duke and Duchess of Northumberland, we behaved with complete composure, as though nothing were amiss between us. I had learned that to dissemble one's feelings was the aristocratic way. The Duke, my father-in-law, was, as always, at pains to compliment me on how well I looked, reminding me that my role was as an enhancement to my husband. The Duchess drew me to her side with her usual kindness. "I fear you must give up Somerset Place soon and return to Ely Palace," she confided in me later in the evening. "The King is minded to send the Lady Elizabeth to live there." The Lady Elizabeth. It was not the first time in my married life that the princess's name had been mentioned, but it was the first time in years that I felt such a strong prick of jealousy. Perhaps it was because Robert and I had quarrelled. Perhaps that had made me realise how far apart we had already drifted. and how his history with her lent their relationship deeper roots than we could ever achieve. I glanced down the table to the empty stool that was the princess's place. When they were at court, both Elizabeth and her half-sister Mary were denied the right to sit with the king beneath the canopy of state. Both were obliged to kneel to him and fulfill all the intricate rituals of royal ceremony. I could not blame them for so frequently sending their excuses in order to be free of his company. It was one of the things I disliked most about the king. To my mind, Edward was fortunate to have his family about him, yet he did not value his sisters. Instead, he demeaned them in ways great and small through his arrogance. I had little liking for Elizabeth, of course, but it made me wince that Edward made no secret of the fact that he believed his sister a bastard. I wished the king would marry her off to some foreign prince in a miserable political bargain and put an end to both her humiliation and my jealousy. "I will not regret a move from Somerset House," I said. The new palace was half-built and draughty and uncomfortable. "I shall look forward to summer back at Ely Place. The strawberries in the garden are the best in London." Her Grace smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. "Summer is far away," she said. "Who knows where we shall all be then?" I did not much care. The news that we were to leave Somerset House had heartened me, even though I wished Robert had been the one to tell me. It had been unpleasant living in a house designed for the Duke of Somerset, not only stepping into a dead man's shoes, but occupying the chamber he had planned for himself. The place was haunted by the ghost of his ambition. It mocked me at every turn, showing me what happened to those who rose too high. Robert laughed at me when I shivered and told him how much I hated living there. He did not understand, even when I tried to explain. I remembered one morning, lying in the huge oaken four-poster bed in our chamber. The window was open, and the breeze blew in from the river. I could hear the cries of the boatmen and the splashes of the waves. There was a scent, too, of fresh air and dank water mingled with thyme and lavender from the gardens, an odd mixture of sweetness, underpinned with something less pleasant. I looked up at the rich red velvet folds of the bed hangings and felt smothered by how opulent our life was. No, I should not be sorry to go, even if it meant that the Lady Elizabeth was once more casting her shadow over my life. In the event, our remove was short-lived. The king developed a fever during that winter and was often struggling for breath. He rallied, but then he would fail again. He started to cough up blood and bile. The doctors, at first hopeful of a recovery, started to despair as gradually Edward grew wasted and weak. In the end, he wanted to die. I could see it in his face. He wanted the peace of it. Yet with each step closer, the Duke too came closer to disaster. I knew that he and Robert and other members of the Privy Chamber plotted like thieves through the spring, and Robert grew ever more distant and did not confide in me. Perhaps I should have been glad of it, for had I known what was to come, I do not know how I would have borne it. It is not good to know the future. I should perhaps have guessed at the wedding in May. It was a ridiculously ornate affair, a triple union of powerful families, with Robert's younger brother, Guildford, marrying Jane Grey, the king's cousin, whilst two other cousins were also parcelled off to tie the bonds of alliance tighter. The king presided over it, looking sick in heart and spirit, and despite the celebrations, there was about it an air of conspiracy and hurry that felt ill-wished. 2 months later, Edward was dead, and Jane as bookish and quiet as he, was the new queen.
"You are crazed,"
I said to Robert when I discovered it. Even though a part of me had not wanted to know the treason they plotted, I was still furious he had not told me his father's plan. I could not hold my tongue.
"The people will never accept Jane over Mary. You live in a fool's paradise."
I had not been there when Jane was proclaimed queen, but I had heard that the news was received by Londoners in silence, but for one poor man, who shouted out for Mary, and was fiercely punished for it. Robert and I were in the old solar, and there were servants all around, their ears out on stalks, but I was too fearful and too angry to care. Robert, who had an equally hot temper, caught me by the arm in a grip that made me wince and hustled me behind an arras. In the enclosed space of the alcove behind, I was suddenly overwhelmed by his physical presence and the sheer force of his anger.
"Hold your tongue, Amy,"
he said bitingly. He gave my arm a little shake before he let me go.
"What do you think? I did not trust you with the truth ahead of time."
His eyes were narrowed, his face set hard.
"I do not wish to hear your gloomy counsel. Jane was the choice of the king himself. We do but enact his will."
"You may dress it up however you please," I said, "but this is your father's work." Robert's gaze scanned my face for one impossibly angry moment. Then he shrugged, some of the tension going out of him.
"What if it is?" he said. "Someone must steer the kingdom."
Don't you see?
I burst out.
I am afraid for you. I am afraid for us. I am your wife, Robert. I do not want to lose you.
It was, by good fortune, the best thing I could have said. His face cleared miraculously, and he pulled me close and wrapped his arms around me.
"Sweetheart,"
he said against my hair.
"You will never lose me. I swear it."
He tilted up my chin and kissed me. There was some of the old fervour in that embrace. I could see he was lit with excitement, just as he had been that night we had met at Stansfield. For Robert, the game was all, and the riskier the better.
"This is for you,"
he whispered as he let me go.
"There is no limit to how high we can climb, Amy, with a Dudley Queen on the throne."
I did not think that the Lady Elizabeth would wish to bend the knee to a Dudley Queen, and I wondered how this ambition squared with Robert's loyalty to her. However, I had the sense to say no more, for those sweet moments were increasingly rare between us, even if to me they secretly felt poisoned. Robert's fingers were entangled with mine, and he kissed my hand as he released me. And then he was gone, his mind already on the weightier matters of treason, and I was left in the window embrasure, staring after him. That same day, Robert left for Cambridgeshire, tasked with hunting down Princess Mary and her supporters. Knowing Robert, I imagine he had no fear of failure. His father was busy trying to buy the support of the Privy Council, and I clung to the Duchess and my sisters-in-law, an unhappy little assemblage of Dudley wives, who tried to put on a brave face while we waited endlessly for news. It came that evening, when the window embrasures were thrown wide to try to draw in the slightest breath of coolness in a London summer that felt as overheated as a powder keg. We had abandoned any attempt to play at cards, and were conversing in low voices, whilst our ears strained for any sound that a messenger might have arrived. It was a terrible, nervous time. I had not eaten for several days, picking anxiously over my food, staying within doors because it was too dangerous to venture out. We all knew that Queen Jane could not command the support of the people, and dreaded what was to come. Even so, the messenger took us by surprise, for it was the Duke himself. He swept into the room, and we scattered like chaff. He went straight to his wife and took her hands in his.
"Forgive me, Jane," he said.
And afterwards, I wondered whether he was apologising for the entire ill-founded disaster.
"I have to leave. Robert pursued the Princess Mary as far as Sawston, but he was too late. The East is rising to support her now. I must take an army."
I gasped, loud enough to catch his attention. He turned to me.
"Rest easy, Amy,"
he said with a tired smile.
"For Robert is quite well."
He had assumed, unsurprisingly, that my concern had been for my husband. I caught his sleeve.
"Your Grace?"
He was anxious to be gone, like all men are when they have resolved upon war. But he turned back to me, courteously enough.
"You mentioned Sawston?"
I said.
"Yes,"
the Duke said.
"The Princess had taken refuge at Sawston Hall, but she was long gone when Robert arrived."
His expression hardened slightly.
"It seems Huddleston got her away to safety."
I saw something change in his eyes as he remembered my connection to the place. There was pity in them now.
"I have no news of your family,"
he said quietly.
"I am sorry."
Then,
Robert ransacked the hall and burned it to the ground.
I do not know how long I stood there staring at him. Then I ran from the room, regardless of all those watching eyes, and just managed to stumble into the privy before I was sick with the little that was left in my stomach. Chapter 11. Lizzie, present day.
What were you thinking?
Bill froze the frame on the picture of Lizzie supporting Dudley out of the nightclub, stumbling into a taxi together like a couple of drunks.
Talk me through it,
he added, his tone deceptively soft.
Talk me through your thought processes here, so that I can understand why it was a good idea for you and Dudley to be seen out in the early hours going home together from a club 2 days after his wife had died.
Lizzie didn't say anything. She hated it when Bill was in one of his viciously sarcastic moods. It didn't happen often. Usually Bill was too aware of her value to him to let rip at her, but she had seen the way he treated other people and had cringed. Today, though, she was his target, and Kat wasn't helping her at all. Her face turned away from Lizzie as she scrolled through her phone messages, making the point that Lizzie had let them both down.
Well?
Bill snapped. He had summoned her to his office that afternoon, rather than come to her. Her career was definitely on the slide.
"Dudley was upset," she said, expressionlessly. "He rang me in tears, and I went to fetch him home. He's all over the place at the moment and needs a friend. Besides, I wanted to ask him something urgently."
Bill interrupted her before she had a chance to finish.
You know what the news sites are saying?
He waved a hand towards the screen again.
That you comforted him with a night of torrid passion.
He glared at her.
For fuck's sake, Lizzie.
He slept on the sofa, Lizzie said.
"Not that it's your business."
It is my business,
Bill corrected her.
Because I look after your business, Lizzie. You won't be surprised to hear that Life Changers have cancelled today's event and dropped you from their campaign. You don't fit the sort of image they want to project anymore. And I had a couple of other charity events lined up for you, but they've fallen through as well.
It's not my fault that people see scandal where none exists, Lizzie argued hotly.
Her overriding emotion was hurt that people were so quick to think badly of her. But she knew that in the hothouse of celebrity, public opinion and mood could turn so quickly. There'd always been people who hadn't believed she and Dudley were just friends, and now they had fuel for their fire, and it hadn't even been worth it. Dudley had been as drunk as a skunk, and when she'd finally got through to him that Johnny had disappeared, he'd mumbled something rude and gone back to sleep. Only a very late message from Arthur via the front desk had reassured her that Johnny was finally home and safe. Arthur had left his number, and she had immediately programmed it into her phone, feeling a bit like a teenager with a crush.
"I've pulled you out of Stars of the Dance," Bill said now. "There was enough shit flying around before this happened, but now—"
"You've done what?"
Lizzie sat bolt upright on the slippery leather sofa.
"You had no right."
"They would have booed you off the floor," Bill said brutally. "And I doubt you could have taken that. You need to be loved, Lizzie. You can't cope with rejection. Don't worry, I've talked to Alessandro, told him it was for your own good. He understands."
Lizzie gaped at him like a stranded fish. There was so much in what Bill had just said, some of it too accurate for comfort, some of it breathtakingly arrogant, all of it objectionable, that she didn't know where to start. On one point, Bill was absolutely right, though. 3 days had been all it had taken to transform her from celebrity sweetheart into toxic property, and some of that was her own fault. If only she hadn't gone to rescue Dudley.
"You don't want to look at Twitter, Lizzie,"
Kat said, not looking up from the screen herself.
"Some of these comments are vicious." "You're your own worst enemy, Lizzie," Bill said heavily. "I don't understand you."
He brought his fist crashing down on the desk, making Kat drop her phone.
"You're headstrong, just like your father. Or perhaps it's bad judgment, I don't know. But you go too far and you don't seem to care."
There was a long, appalled silence. Lizzie could feel the colour draining from her face and the angry tears burning her eyes.